Chapter 197. Go to Watch Network. It was another new semester. Go to watch. There was a big difference between the beginning of school after the summer vacation and the beginning of school after the winter vacation. The difference was that the former, for the freshmen, would usher in the most important and unforgettable period of their lives. They would change from high school students to college students. Many of them would start to skip classes, hang out in internet cafes, pick up girls, or be bookworms in the ivory tower. For the older students, the latter, after the summer vacation, they would be able to see many beautiful women and handsome boys who had just entered the school. As the backbone of the student union, Fong Na would naturally welcome the freshmen every year. Moreover, as a senior sister who had just been promoted to a senior and a strong competitor for the next president of the student union, it was naturally impossible for her to escape this kind of work, which was similar to pulling able-bodied men. At the Tiannan railway station, the freshman welcome stations of each school were lined up one by one, forming a square formation. The beautiful girls and handsome boys of each school were warmly greeting every freshman who came to register at their respective stations. It was like a unique scenery in the railway station square. "Nana, give me a bottle of water." Ching Ching stretched out her hand to Fong Na while fanning herself with a small plastic fan. Fong Na took out a bottle of water from the mineral water box at her feet, threw it over, and said, "How many is this?" 138. "Oh, I'm so tired." Fong Na smiled as she sent a freshman away. Her face immediately collapsed. She gulped down a mouthful of water, then wiped her mouth and said, "F***ck, this year's freshmen are all perverts. They all stare at my chest." Fong Na couldn't help laughing and scolding, "Come on, you really don't take advantage of it. Who told you to wear this kind of low-cut sweatshirt? Isn't it just for the perverts to see?" Ching Ching rolled her eyes. "Even so, you can't just stuff your eyeballs into them." Fong Na was about to speak, but she heard a panting voice next to her. "Fong Na, water." Fong Na turned her head and saw Wu Hui coming back, sweating all over, shouting at her. Fong Na picked up a bottle of water and threw it over. She said with a smile, "Did you send it to the train? Is it heavy?" Wu Hui unscrewed the lid, gulped down a few mouthfuls, and then poured the water on his head. He put his hands on his hips and grumbled, "These freshmen are too exaggerated. They bring everything. I can tolerate it if they bring computers, but there are actually people who bring televisions. The most exaggerated thing is that there are people who bring electric fans. My God, my back almost broke from exhaustion. If there's more luggage later, you guys go and carry it yourselves. I can't carry it anymore." Although Fong Na didn't have a good relationship with Wu Hui, and she didn't really like his character, they were classmates at the same time, and they were all here to help. She didn't want to give him the cold shoulder, so she smiled and said, "As the saying goes, the capable do more work. You're the only boy here. Who else can do it if not you? Besides, it's normal for a new student to have more things." Just as she finished speaking, she heard a mischievous voice from the side, "Okay, I heard you guys badmouthing our new student." Fong Na, Wu Hui, and Ching Ching all turned their heads and saw a girl wearing a light yellow dress and a milky white woven straw hat blinking at them. Watch net. Color *** literature _learning %super #speed. Update. The girl was very beautiful. She had big eyes, long eyelashes, and snow-white skin. She was about 1.65 meters tall and had a well-proportioned figure. She was very attractive. Wu Hui's eyes lit up and he immediately said with a flattering smile, "You flatter me. Are you a freshman? What's his name? Which department?" The girl smiled and said, "I'm Jiang Xiuxiu, majoring in film and television performance." Jiang Xiuxiu, Jiang as in Chiang Kai-shek, Xiu as in Xiucai, right? Ching Ching looked up. Jiang Xiuxiu corrected her, "It's Jiang as in Jiang Qin, and Xiao as in a feast for the eyes. Ching felt a chill in her heart. This girl is indeed a film and television performance student. She's so King arrogant. When Wu Hui saw the beautiful girl, he immediately became attentive. He took the initiative to run to Jiang Xiuxiu and help her carry her luggage. Feng Na couldn't help but tease him, "Aren't you exhausted?" Wu Hui smiled sheepishly. He didn't respond to Feng Na. Instead, he bent over to pick up the two large suitcases beside Jiang Xiuxiu. Jiang Xiuxiu pursed her lips and said with a smile, "My suitcases are very heavy. Be careful." Wu Hui laughed and waved his hand proudly. "Don't worry, I'm the sports committee member of the student union." After that, he even made a bodybuilder's pose. Feng Na and Ching looked at each other and couldn't stand it. Jiang Xiuxiu giggled and watched him make a fool of himself. After Wu Hui finished his pose, he bent down to carry his suitcases. As soon as he lifted them, his body suddenly sank, and he almost broke his waist. The two big suitcases didn't move at all. Wu Hui's expression suddenly changed. He stammered, "What are you carrying in these bricks? Why are they so heavy?" Feng Na also walked over curiously and tried to lift them, only to feel that the suitcases were like a big weight, not moving at all. Feng Na secretly stuck out her tongue and smiled at Wu Hui. "Sports committee member, it's up to you now." In front of a beautiful woman, Wu Hui didn't dare to lose face. He secretly gritted his teeth, exerted his strength, and forcibly lifted the two suitcases. However, after taking only 2 steps, he had to put them down. Panting, he waved his hand and said, "No, one at a time." Ching laughed and said, "You're so stupid. The suitcases can be dragged. Can't you just drag them all the way?" Wu Hui suddenly slapped his forehead. "Yeah, why didn't I think of that?" Ching muttered in a low voice, "Nonsense, you just want to show off in front of a beautiful woman. Your IQ is in the negative." Feng Na accompanied Jiang Xiuxiu, while Wu Hui dragged the 2 heavy suitcases to the school's minibus. Wu Hui gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, and forcibly carried the suitcases into the bus. It was only a few steps, but he was so tired that he almost spat out his tongue. By the time he carried the second suitcase on the bus, he was already panting like a bull. He couldn't help but think, "I have to carry this suitcase off the bus and carry it to the girls' dormitory for her. It's fine if it's on the 1st floor, but if it's on the 5th floor. Oh my God, won't it kill me?" Thinking of this, Wu Hui's face suddenly turned ashen. He didn't even have the heart to show off in front of the beautiful woman. All he could think about was how not to embarrass himself. Go to Kanban. 7 K.O.M. Feng Na seemed to know what he was thinking, so she said, "Wu Hui, you stay here to welcome the new students. I'll accompany Jiang Xiuxiu back. When we get there, I'll call a few boys to help her move it. If you're not here, Ching and I won't be able to move the things, right?" Hearing this, Wu Hui immediately nodded his head like a rattle drum. Good idea. After saying this, he turned around and walked away without looking at Jiang Xiuxiu. Jiang Xiuxiu watched his back as he left, a smile at the corner of her mouth. "This senior is quite fun, and he's also quite handsome," she said in a low voice. For some reason, she suddenly thought of Li Yundong, who she hadn't seen for more than 2 months. Is he okay? I haven't seen him for more than 2 months. Has anything changed? Feng Na was lost in thought for a moment. Seeing her in a daze, Jiang Xiuxiu waved her hand in front of her eyes and said with a smile, "Senior, what are you thinking about?" After that, she said with an ambiguous expression on her face, "Are you thinking about the senior just now?" Feng Na snorted and said grumpily, "Why would I be thinking about him?" Jiang Xiuxiu was an easygoing person. She smiled and bumped Feng Na with her shoulder. "Senior, don't be shy." Feng Na and Jiang Xiuxiu sat down on the bus. Feng Na smiled and said, "It's really not him. Besides, I already have someone I like." Jiang Xiuxiu opened her eyes wide and asked, "Who is it?" Feng Na couldn't help feeling sweet and sour at the thought of Li Yundong. She said with a myriad of emotions, "You don't know him. Don't ask." Jiang Xiuxiu nodded and sat in her seat without saying anything. The two of them waited for a while. Seeing that there were no other freshmen coming, Feng Na said to the driver, "Mr. Zhao, drive her back first." The driver responded, and the minibus slowly drove out of the square and merged into the traffic. After nearly half an hour, the minibus finally drove to the gate of Tiannan University. The driver saw that the two girls couldn't move the luggage, so he went to help. The three of them worked hard to get the luggage down. Seeing that the driver was so tired that he couldn't even straighten his back, Feng Na didn't want to bother him anymore. "Mr. Zhao, I don't want to bother you here. You go to the bus station first. I'll call some boys to help." Mr. Zhao's eyes were fixed on the two heavy suitcases, which looked like they were stuffed with stones. He didn't dare to show off. Okay, he said and drove away. Feng Na said to Jiang Xiuxiu, "Wait here. I'll call some boys." Seeing Feng Na running toward the campus, Jiang Xiuxiu couldn't help but mutter, "Aren't there boys here? Why are you going there to call them?" After that, she saw a boy passing by not far away. She subconsciously shouted, "Hey, handsome." The boy was wearing a white Armani long-sleeved casual shirt and a pair of black trousers of unknown brand. He was wearing a pair of sneakers and carrying a long, thick, and long object wrapped in black cloth on his back. She didn't know what it was. The boy ignored her and walked forward. Jiang Xiuxiu was a little stunned. She couldn't help but shout again, "Handsome, I'm calling you." Her voice was quite loud. The boys around the school, whether ugly or handsome, all turned their heads to look at her. However, the boy didn't turn his head. Jiang Xiuxiu was so angry that she couldn't help but rush to the boy, grab his hand, and shouted, "Hey, I'm calling you." But as soon as she grabbed his hand, the boy seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. He quickly stepped forward and dodged her hand. Then he turned around and looked at Jiang Xiuxiu. Jiang Xiuxiu was about to open her mouth to speak, but she suddenly saw the boy. Her heart suddenly thumped. The boy was about 1.75 meters tall. His skin was a little tanned, but he exuded a healthy and masculine aura. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes, which were bright and full of expression. His nose was tall and straight like a mountain, proud and straight. His lips were firm and strong, and he exuded an aura of determination and confidence. Jiang Xiuxiu didn't know how many boys had been around her since she was a child, but she had never seen such a handsome and masculine boy. She was tongue-tied for a moment and just stared at the boy in front of her. She was usually a glib talker, but she couldn't say a word. Jiang Xiuxiu only felt that the boy just stood there, but he had a temperament that was as still as a pine tree and as tall as a mountain. This was a temperament that most men in this world didn't have. Only those who had really experienced great storms could have such a temperament. The boy looked at Jiang Xiuxiu and smiled slightly. "What's the matter?" When the boy smiled, Jiang Xiuxiu felt her heart beating wildly. She said, "I want to ask you to help me carry my luggage." The boy smiled and said, "A freshman?" Jiang Xiuxiu was a person who could grasp the right to speak no matter where she was, but at this time, she couldn't help following the boy's topic. She nodded foolishly and said, "Yes." The boy nodded and walked to her suitcase. He pointed at the two suitcases and said, "These two." Jiang Xiuxiu couldn't help but nod and immediately said in a panic, "Wait a minute, it's very heavy. I'll call 2 more boys to help, or you won't be able to carry it." As she said this, she ran to the side to find other boys. But when the other boys looked in the direction she was pointing at, they immediately laughed and said, "With him, what else do we need to do?" Jiang Xiuxiu turned her head in surprise, only to see that the boy had already carried 2 suitcases in his hands and was striding toward the school. Jiang Xiuxiu was so shocked that her eyeballs almost fell out. She quickly ran up to the boy and said as if she had seen King Kong, You can carry it?" The boy tilted his head slightly, looked at her and smiled. "I think I can." Jiang Xiuxiu's eyes widened. "Isn't it heavy?" The boy smiled slightly. "It's not bad." Jiang Xiuxiu didn't say anything. She didn't know how many heroes had been killed along the way with these 2 suitcases. Many boys who wanted to come up to her were scared away by these 2 suitcases. The boy in front of her actually picked up the suitcases effortlessly, and his expression didn't change at all along the way. "Is this guy a monster?" Jiang Xiuxiu muttered to herself. She reported. After the dormitory was assigned, the boy sent her luggage to the girls' dormitory on the 3rd floor. Jiang Xiuxiu found that when some of the senior sisters in the dormitory saw the boy, their eyes suddenly lit up with admiration and worship. They stood by the stairs and looked at him as if they were paying attention to him. They didn't even dare to speak loudly, just whispering to each other. "It seems that I accidentally found a big shot in this school." Jiang Xiuxiu muttered to herself. The boy put the suitcases away and didn't stay. He didn't come to talk to her like other boys and get close to her. He just said, "Is this the place? I've put the luggage for you. I'll go first." After that, he turned around and went out the door. Jiang Xiuxiu was stunned. "No way. So cool. Wasn't this too cool without a conscience? He didn't even give me a chance to ask for his name, phone number, and QQ." Thinking of this, she rushed out of the door and chased after the boy all the way to the dormitory building. She shouted, "Hey, I still don't know your name." The boy didn't look back. He waved his hand and said, "My name is Lei Feng." Jiang Xiuxiu suddenly spat, "Bah." She was staring at the boy's back in a daze when she heard Feng Na's surprised voice. "Jiang Xiuxiu, what are you doing here? Where's your luggage?" Jiang Xiuxiu turned her head and saw 2 strong boys standing next to Feng Na. They were looking at her in surprise. As soon as Jiang Xiuxiu saw Feng Na, she immediately grabbed her and pointed at the boy's back. "Hey, do you know this boy? Is he from our school? What's his name? Who is he?" Chapter 198. Go to watch net. Looking at the boy's back as he walked away, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She felt that this back was so similar to the boy she missed, but when she took a closer look, she felt that it was different. Go to Kanban. 1-1. Although the height and back were somewhat similar, she felt that there was something different about the way he walked and his bearing. For a moment, she didn't dare to recognize him, so she smiled and said to Jiang Xiuxiu, "I don't know. Maybe he's a freshman." Jiang Xiuxiu's face was full of disappointment. Looking at the boy's back as he walked away, she thought to herself, "It doesn't matter. I'll find him for you sooner or later." Ever since Li Yundong's trip to Tibet and the incident with Mei Duo, he had been no longer as casual as before when dealing with girls. He didn't even tell Jiang Xiuxiu his name, so he didn't even tell her his name. Carrying the fan of 7 treasures on his back, Li Yundong went to his classroom. At this time, there was almost no one in the classroom, which surprised him. But on second thought, he remembered that today was the day for new students to register, and classes would not start until tomorrow. He smiled, carried the fan of 7 treasures on his back, and went to the school library. Fortunately, the school library was open today. Li Yundong applied for a library card and walked in. As soon as he entered, Li Yundong first used the computer to search for religious books. He was surprised to find that the library really had a lot of books. There were hundreds of religious books. After searching for the results, Li Yundong chose 2 books, Diamond Sutra, and Flower of Dharma Sutra, and then borrowed them from the librarian. The librarian was an old man in his 70s. As soon as he saw that Li Yundong wanted to borrow the 2 books, he immediately picked up the presbyopic glasses hanging in front of his neck and looked Li Yundong up and down carefully. Then, he sighed and said, "It's rare for young people to borrow these kinds of books these days." As he spoke, he walked to the bookshelf, searched for a while, and then took out the 2 books. Because almost no one paid attention to them, the 2 books looked as good as new. The old man clapped his hands and said, "This is the first time this book has been borrowed since it entered the library. Hey, young man, can you understand it?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Not necessarily. Let's take a look first." The old man smiled. "Don't think that I'm too talkative. If you don't understand, don't break the book." After saying that, he seemed to feel that there was something wrong with his words and said, "Of course, even if you can understand it, don't break the book." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "No, teacher. I will cherish my books." Watch net. 7ko-/ The old man nodded with a smile and watched Li Yundong walk out of the library with the 2 books. He sighed softly and said, "It's really not easy. There are actually young people who are willing to calm down and read such books." Li Yundong opened the Vajra Sutra. After reading a few pages, he found that the book was not as profound and terrifying as he had imagined. In the beginning, there were many Buddhist stories, full of spirituality and wisdom, which were easy to understand. In the middle, there was a dialogue between Subhuti and Buddha. The 2 of them were like in the Yellow Emperor's canon, similar to the question and answer between the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan and Qi Bo. Although it was written in classical Chinese, Li Yundong could understand it. Moreover, with the Buddhist stories at the front of the book as a foreshadowing and guidance, he read it with relish. Most importantly, if Li Yundong had read this kind of book in the past, he would have been drowsy and annoyed at the first page. But now that he was a cultivator, he had some understanding of cultivation. Moreover, he had read the Mahamudra Secret Method Sutra, which also contained a lot of theoretical knowledge of Buddhist scriptures. He had also practiced the Mahamudra himself, so he had some enlightenment in his heart. Li Yundong was originally talented and intelligent, and he had some enlightenment in his heart. At this time, when he looked at this Buddhist classic again, he suddenly felt as if a string had been touched in his heart, and he understood something. But after he understood something, the more he felt that there was more he didn't understand, the more he read on greedily. On the way back, Li Yundong kept reading the book. After entering the house, he sat in the living room, facing the east. He sat cross-legged and was so engrossed in reading that he didn't even notice Ruan Hongling and Zi Yuan entering his house. Zi Yuan opened the door and saw Li Yundong sitting cross-legged in the living room. He was holding a classic in his hand and reading it attentively. Beside him was another classic, on which were written 3 golden ancient seal scripts, Dharma Hua Sutra. Zi Yuan turned around and gestured to Ruan Hongling to keep quiet, then quietly left with her. Ruan Hongling asked in confusion, "Sister Zi Yuan, isn't he practicing Taoist magic? Why is he reading Buddhist classics?" After a moment of silence, Zi Yuan said, "Maybe he wants to practice both Buddhism and Taoism." Ruan Hongling snickered, "Since ancient times, how many people have wanted to practice both Buddhism and Taoism, but only Lu Huayang and Wu Shouyang can be called masters. The others have neglected the essentials to pursue trifles, like picking up sesame seeds and losing watermelons. Does he also want to follow in their footsteps?" Zi Yuan also felt that Ruan Hongling's words were reasonable. After all, since Buddhism was introduced into China in the later Han dynasty, there had been all kinds of open and secret struggles with Taoism. This kind of struggle reached its peak in the later Tang dynasty under the instigation of the mystical Silver Fox. From then on, Buddhism and Taoism were at odds. Watch net. 7ko Hong O Min. The past 2,000 years, countless Buddhist cultivators had wanted to learn Taoist magic, and countless Taoist cultivators had wanted to learn Buddhist magic, but almost all of them had failed. The Buddhist and Taoist sects had strict barriers and ravines. How could it be so easy to practice dual cultivation? In the past 2,000 years, only a handful of people had been able to do it. Could Li Yundong do it? Thinking of this, Zi Yuan said, "Don't say that. Even if you practice Taoist skills, you can also read the classics of Buddhism. After all, it's beneficial to learn from all kinds of schools and learn from the strengths of all schools. Moreover, Buddhism and Taoism also have something in common, so it's not a big deal to read them." This time, he went to Tibet and traveled thousands of miles. Not only has his strength increased a lot, but his knowledge has also increased a lot. Now it's time to read thousands of books. The two of them were whispering outside the door. Unknowingly, Li Yundong had already finished reading the contents of the Vajra Sutra, where Subhuti and the Buddha talked about the emptiness of all living beings and the emptiness of Dharma. After reading it, Li Yundong sat on the spot in a daze. The contents of the Vajra Sutra kept replaying in his mind. He felt that he had understood it, but when he was asked to say it out, he seemed to be a little unable to express it. It was as if he was looking at flowers in the fog, separated by a layer of invisible gauze. It was hazy. Li Yundong thought for a while, then stopped thinking about it. He put down the sutra in his hand and went to read the second book, the sutra. However, Li Yundong didn't know that his behavior coincided with the Taoist mentality of cultivating freely, and it also coincided with the Buddhist principle of cultivating without any hindrance. If it had been someone else, they might have had to figure out this ideal and figure it out. If they didn't understand it, they would not give up. But this kind of behavior was exactly like Qigong deviation. Li Yundong didn't have enough knowledge now, so it was impossible for him to understand the truth behind it. If he forced himself to think about it, it would be like asking a person with only 10 kilograms of strength to lift 100 kilograms of weight. Not only would he not be able to lift it, but he would also hurt his own body. Su Chan said that he had a first-class cultivation temperament, and this was the reason. He never forced himself to do something that was difficult. After more than an hour, Li Yundong finished reading the sutra. When he came to his senses, it was already past 12 o'clock. He casually had lunch, then carried the fan of 7 treasures and the books to school. When he arrived at the school library, the old librarian saw Li Yundong walking back with the 2 books. He sighed in his heart, "Sure enough, these 2 books are not for young people like me." Li Yundong came up to him and said, "I'm here to return the books, teacher." The old man sighed in his heart and took the 2 books. "You can't understand them?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Not bad." The old man squinted at Li Yundong and thought to himself, still trying to be brave. "Humph, young people pretend to know what they don't know." He pretended to be intentional and asked casually, "What is the color, fragrance, and touch?" Li Yundong also answered casually, "In addition, the 6 realms." The old man was stunned, as if he couldn't believe his ears. He asked again, "Then what is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "These are the 6 realms." After answering, he didn't wait for the old man to ask again. He continued to say, "The root and dust are opposite, and the 6 realms arise. The so-called eye, ear, and sense are the 18 realms. Not only are the 6 realms unrestrained, but there are also the 5 skandhas, the 18 realms, the 12 karmas, the 4 truths, the 37 Taoist treasures, and the 81 subjects of Bodhi and Nirvana." The old man looked at Li Yundong in surprise and said, "Well, you really read this book? I thought you hadn't read it. How much have you read?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "All of it." The old man was unhappy again. He said unhappily, "Young man, you don't even have a draft when you're bragging. Then let me ask you, what is the pure believer with one thought?" Although Li Yundong couldn't fully understand the Vajra Sutra, he had a good memory, so he answered casually, "There is no doubt about it. This one thought is the thought of no thought. If there is a second thought, it is the thought of no thought. If there is a second thought, it is the thought of calculating and doubting. The key is not to underestimate the younger generation. In the age of Dharma ending, there are also people who have the pure believer. The old man opened his mouth wide and asked again, "What do you mean by Lu Alan's line?" Li Yundong immediately said, "Words and deeds are without doubt, and joy is silence." The old man's eyes widened, and he asked again unwillingly, "Then tell me, what is the pure believer?" Li Yundong said with a smile, "The pure believer is not real. The pure believer is the Bodhi. If you can't get it according to your words, it is the pure believer. If you can't get it according to your words, it is the pure believer." The old man asked one question after another. Not only did Li Yundong answer quickly and without thinking, but his answers were almost exactly the same as those in the book. Only then was the old man convinced. He looked at Li Yundong in shock and said, "You finished reading it so quickly. That's amazing. I've underestimated you. Have you also finished reading the sutra?" Li Yundong said with a smile, "Yes, why don't you take a test too?" The old man laughed and waved his hand. Forget it, forget it. You can't be defeated by the test. I believe you. I just think that it's impossible for young people nowadays to understand these scriptures, so I'm testing you. I hope you don't mind." Li Yundong chuckled, winked, and said, "Test, test, test. The teacher's powerful magical weapon, the student's lifeblood." When the old man heard this, he laughed and said in a loud voice, "Not bad, not bad. I've found the feeling of being a teacher again." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then how many points did I get just now?" The old man gave him a thumbs up and said, "Amazing, 100 points." As he spoke, he put on his presbyopic glasses and sighed with emotion. There are too few young people like you nowadays. Amazing, really amazing. Li Yundong was a little embarrassed by the praise. He said, "I want to borrow 2 more books." The old man nodded quickly. "Okay, which 2 do you want to borrow?" Li Yundong said, "The Surangama Sutra and the Zongjing Record." The old man was shocked again. He glanced at Li Yundong and thought to himself, "Oh my God, another 2 classics." He didn't dare to look down on Li Yundong anymore. He went to get the 2 books and said, "Come back next time. I still have to take a test." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Welcome, welcome." As he said this, he said hello to the old man and turned to walk out. The old man watched him leave and couldn't help but dial a phone number. "Hello, Xiaohua, today I met an expert who can challenge you. That Dharma study, TSK, amazing, really amazing." "What? Old man? Ha, you're wrong. He's about the same age as you, and he's even in the same school as you. You don't believe me? Ha, you'll know when you meet him one day. Don't be so arrogant all day long. You think that you're amazing just because you got the top scorer in the city. There are many people in this world who are better than you." Chapter 199. Go to watch net. When Li Yundong returned home in the afternoon, he finished reading the Surangama Sutra and the Zongjing Lu. When he went to school the next day, he first went to the library to return the books, then borrowed the 2 books, Treatise on Typhoid and Miscellaneous Diseases and Huandan Revival chapter. Go to watch net. When the old man in the library saw that Li Yundong was no longer borrowing Buddhist classics this time, but medical and Taoist classics, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "You really read all kinds of books? You can even understand these?" Li Yundong nodded with a smile. "It's normal. I can barely make do with it. If there's something I don't understand, I'll slowly understand it in the future." The old man nodded. "Well, you like to read but don't seek to understand. Good, good, you have the style of Tao Yuan Ming." Li Yundong smiled and walked out of the library with the 2 books. Although it was already the beginning of school, the campus was already full of people. There were new students who had just entered the school and were full of vigor and curiosity about everything. There were also old students who gathered in twos and threes and pointed at the new students and made comments about them. Li Yundong stood on the campus with the fan of 7 treasures on his back and suddenly felt a wave of emotion in his heart. He suddenly remembered the day he had met the little girl. Su Chan had flown into his arms like a fluttering butterfly and changed his fate from then on. Li Yundong looked at the familiar campus and the familiar faces. He remembered the bits and pieces of time he had spent with Su Chan and the arduous cultivation he had gone to Tibet. He suddenly felt as if it had been a lifetime. Li Yundong sighed in his heart and walked toward the teaching building. There were old students in the school who knew him. When they saw him, the boys who had been chatting and laughing immediately stopped talking and stood still. They couldn't help but stand to the side and look at Li Yundong, not daring to say a word. The girls who had been chattering and laughing also stopped talking and looked at Li Yundong with admiration. No matter how brave some of them were, they only dared to look at him from afar, but they didn't dare to go forward and talk to him. Wherever Li Yundong went, it was as if a water-repellent pearl had entered the sea. The crowd automatically parted and made way for him. The people next to him didn't even dare to breathe. Although 2 months had passed, the legend left by Li Yundong in this school had been deeply rooted in people's hearts. The older students who had witnessed and heard these things would spend the rest of their lives remembering these things and spreading these things. Watch net. Color *** literature _learning %super #speed. Update. However, there were also some freshmen who had just entered the university. Although they couldn't help but stand aside and stare at Li Yundong, their eyes were filled with curiosity, confusion, doubt, envy, and even jealousy. Who is this guy? Why are you acting like a mafia boss? A freshman asked in confusion. A second-year senior student standing next to him looked at him with disdain and said, "Your life will probably only reach the level of a mafia boss." Then who is he? The freshman was not convinced and said, "Is he worse than the boss of the underworld?" "Young man, you should check out the school forum more often," the senior student said disdainfully. "He's a legend of our school." The freshman snorted and said disapprovingly, "What's so great about him? You talk like he's worth tens of thousands of dollars." In the past, Li Yundong would have been affected by these kinds of comments, but now he only felt that his heart was as calm as still water. Li Yundong walked into the classroom and sat down. For a moment, all the students in the classroom stopped talking and looked at him in unison. Their eyes followed Li Yundong wherever he went. When Li Yundong sat down, they went back to whispering and chattering, but the topic of conversation had changed to Li Yundong. "I haven't seen him in 2 months, and he seems to have gotten even more handsome." Yeah, as the saying goes, a girl changes 18 times before she reaches womanhood. Could it be that men are like this too? He seems to have tanned a little and become more manly. Li Yundong looked around the classroom and saw the class monitor, Sun Li. He smiled and nodded at her as a form of greeting, but Zhou Qin was nowhere to be seen. Li Yundong didn't see Zhou Qin until class started. Ding Nan, on the other hand, was late. Go to watch net. 7 k.o.m. After class was over, Li Yundong called out to Ding Nan. Ding Nan. Ding Nan had changed a lot as well. She used to dress fashionably and sexily, but now she was wearing a light cyan casual dress, which made her look no different from an ordinary student. Her hair was also cascading down her back, making her look very plain. When she saw Li Yundong, her eyes immediately lit up. She said with surprise and joy, "Li Yundong, it's you. I haven't seen you for 2 months. You've become more handsome." Li Yundong smiled. "I'm fine. By the way, have you seen Zhou Qin?" The smile on Ding Nan's face crumbled when she heard this. Her eyes were filled with disappointment and anger. "You never took the initiative to talk to me before," she said. I was wondering why you suddenly took the initiative to look for me today. You wanted to ask me about Zhou Qin, didn't you? Humph. So I was just flattering myself. Li Yundong's smile froze. Aren't you guys good friends? He said sheepishly. I just thought it was a little strange that she didn't show up today. Call her yourself. Ding Nan said angrily. You have her phone number, don't you? After that, she turned around and stormed off, tears welling up in the corners of her eyes. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know that the hatred between Zhou Qin and Ding Nan was so deep that it was almost unsolvable. He thought he had said something wrong. As he stood there speechlessly, he suddenly felt someone reach out and pat him on the shoulder. Li Yundong took a step back and turned around. When he looked back, he saw that Feng Na's hand had reached out and patted the air. Cheng Cheng was looking at him with pursed lips and a smile. Huh, it's you guys. Li Yundong laughed. It really is you. Feng Na stared at Li Yundong in a daze. I couldn't even recognize you when I saw you yesterday. Li Yundong smiled. Have I really changed that much? Feng Na looked at Li Yundong carefully. In her eyes, this boy had become thinner than before, but this thinness made him look more refined and masculine, full of strength. His skin had become darker, which was obviously the result of frequent exposure to the sun during the summer. His hair had become longer, but he looked elegant and elegant. His eyes had become deeper, brighter, and more charming. Most importantly, he seemed to have lost all traces of the little boy he used to be. Instead, he was a man who was becoming more mature. You. Feng Na was in a trance for a moment. She felt that the Li Yundong in front of her had become a different person. There was only a similar shell here, and many things inside had changed. She couldn't recognize him anymore. You've changed so much. Feng Na couldn't help but reach out her hand, wanting to touch Li Yundong's face. You've changed so much that I can't recognize you anymore. Are you really Li Yundong? Li Yundong smiled slightly. I'm the real deal. Cheng Cheng also looked Li Yundong up and down, then sighed. What did you do during the summer? Why do you look like a different person now? Something important must have happened during the 2 months of the summer, right? Feng Na suddenly asked. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. A woman's intuition is really scary. He smiled. He didn't admit it, but he didn't deny it either. Feng Na knew that Li Yundong didn't want to talk about it, so she didn't ask any more questions. She stared at Li Yundong for a while until Cheng Cheng couldn't stand it anymore and secretly gave Feng Na an elbow. Feng Na snapped out of her daze. Look, she said. The new semester has started. How about I find a place to treat you to dinner? Li Yundong laughed. No way. You want me to take advantage of you on the first day? Cheng Cheng giggled. You want to take advantage of Nana? Okay. She couldn't ask for more. Feng Na turned around and pinched the soft flesh of Cheng Cheng's waist, her face red with embarrassment. I told you to say it. I told you to say it. Feng Na said angrily. The two of them fought for a while. After Cheng Cheng humiliated her and begged for mercy, Feng Na returned to the court in victory. She glanced at Li Yundong, her cheeks red, as if she was afraid that he would overthink it. But when Feng Na looked at Li Yundong, she saw him standing there, unmoving like a mountain. There was a faint smile on his face, and his eyes were calm and warm. He was like a transcendent being. Feng Na's heart skipped a beat. She knew that her feeling was right. This boy was really different from before. He had grown up and matured. She could tell from the calm manner in which he stood there. Sorry for making a fool of myself again. Feng Na coughed dryly and explained, blushing. Li Yundong smiled. It's nothing. Where are we going for dinner? Ching Ching smiled. Didn't you say that we were going to a restaurant last time? But then President Chow came, so we didn't go. Let's go to that restaurant now. Feng Na smiled. Okay, okay. Let's go there. Then she suddenly thought of something. By the way, where's Su Chan? Why don't I see her with you? Aren't the two of you inseparable? Li Yundong smiled and said, she went to her master's place. Feng Na saw that although Li Yundong was calm when he said this, she keenly caught a flash of longing and a touch of sadness in the corner of his eyes. Her heart skipped a beat, and she asked tentatively, then, when will she come back? Li Yundong smiled. It won't be long. It should be in 2 months. I'll pick her up. Feng Na didn't say anything, but a trace of sadness flashed in her eyes. The three of them walked downstairs. As soon as they left the teaching building, Jiang Shuxiu saw Feng Na. She was about to go up and say hello when she saw the boy who had helped her carry her luggage and acted so cool that he had no conscience was also with her. Jiang Shuxiu sneered in her heart. Wow, last time you said you didn't know him, and now you're hooking up with him. It turns out that you didn't want me to know him yesterday. Humph, isn't he just a guy who likes to act cool? What's so great about him? How dare he act cool in front of me? I'll go and provoke him, /om/. Chapter 200. Go to watch net. Thinking of this, Jiang Shuxiu rolled her eyes and pretended to be surprised. Wow, senior, it's so rare to meet you here. After that, she seemed to recognize Li Yundong and said in surprise, handsome, you're here too. Li Yundong smiled and nodded at her. Feng Na was about to introduce Li Yundong to Jiang Shuxiu, but Jiang Shuxiu pretended to be surprised and said, senior sister, you left so fast yesterday. I have so many questions to ask you. Jiang Shuxiu was like a machine gun, talking and complaining about a lot of things. Most of them were complaints about freshmen who had just arrived at this place and were unfamiliar with it. Feng Na couldn't help laughing and said, you are so beautiful. There should be a lot of boys rushing to help you. Jiang Shuxiu rolled her eyes, pointed to the mulberry tree and scolded the locust tree, and said, senior sister, there are some, but some boys really know how to act cool. After helping, they actually turn around and leave. They are really not gentlemanly. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Feng Na smiled and said, does he want you to marry him? Jiang Shuxiu covered her mouth and giggled. Senior, you are so funny. Ah, by the way, last night I heard that there is a very legendary figure in our school. I think his name is Li Yundong, right? Feng Na couldn't help glancing at Li Yundong. Just as she was about to say that the person next to her was Li Yundong, Jiang Shuxiu said, hey, senior, is what they said true? Is that Li Yundong really that handsome? Is he really that strong? Those things sound so incredible. Feng Na's expression was a little strange. She tried to hold back her laughter and said to Li Yundong, hey, what do you think? Is this Li Yundong really that handsome? Is he really that strong? Li Yundong also had a strange look on his face. He had never encountered a situation like mistaking Feng Jing for Ma Liang. He coughed and said, actually, he is very ordinary. Although he said it modestly, Jiang Shuxiu didn't think so. She had deliberately used this legendary figure to provoke the cool-looking boy in front of her. The little girl's mind was very simple, aren't you trying to be cool in front of me? Don't use this kind of retreating in order to advance. Do you think I don't know how to use it? There are a lot of people in this school who are better than you. Isn't Li Yundong one of them? Compared with him, don't put on airs in front of me. Jiang Shuxiu felt that Li Yundong's words were obviously sour grapes. She couldn't help but snort and say, can you send an adult flying with a punch from a few meters away? Can you dodge 7 close-range shots from a gunman in a school shooting? Can you save two girls who jumped off the building one after another? Can you make a Mercedes move half a meter horizontally with one punch? Humph, from what I see, you only know how to act cool and say some sour words. Logically speaking, if a guy helped a beautiful girl and then left in a cool manner, doing a good deed without leaving his name, and now being scolded by this girl, there was a high chance that he would feel very indignant. Watch net. OM/okay, I helped you, and now you're scolding me. This was the normal way of thinking. Therefore, as long as an ordinary guy said this, Jiang Shuxiu immediately had the right to speak. She could lead the guy by the nose and say, "Didn't you want to act cool? Why are you taking me seriously now? Humph, now you know how to be anxious. You're just playing hard to get my attention, aren't you?" Jiang Shuxiu had been beautiful since she was a child, so she could be said to be well-versed in the methods of war between men and women. She was familiar with all kinds of strategies. Therefore, in her opinion, this guy actually dared to play tricks on her. Humph, he really overestimated himself. But Jiang Shuxiu never thought that the guy in front of her was actually an ordinary student. Jiang Shuxiu's words made Cheng, who had been silent all this time, burst into laughter. Feng Na couldn't help but cover her mouth and giggle. The two girls pointed at Li Yundong and laughed so hard that they were rocking back and forth. They had never seen Li Yundong being talked about like that before. What was even funnier was that Jiang Shuxiu actually used Li Yundong's past to mock him. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but Jiang Shuxiu thought that she had hit the soft spot of the boy in front of her. She took Feng Na's arm with a smile and said, "Senior, do you think so too?" The more Feng Na thought about it, the funnier she felt. In the end, she laughed so hard that tears almost flowed out of her eyes. Jiang Shuxiu grabbed her arm, so she held back her laughter and nodded. Yes, this guy loves to act cool. Cheng rubbed her stomach with one hand and her cheeks that were sore from laughing with the other. She said, "Junior sister, you're really amazing. You can see through this guy's true colors at a glance. Amazing." After that, the two girls burst into laughter again. Watch net. 7KOM. Net. Super_speed. More. New. Jiang Shuxiu didn't notice that the two girls' laughter was a little strange. Instead, she said proudly, "Of course, I have a pair of fiery eyes." Feng Na wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and said, "So, you're also a fan of Li Yundong, right?" In order to provoke the boy in front of her, Jiang Shuxiu nodded vigorously and pretended to be infatuated with him. "Of course," she said. "I'm the most hardcore kind." Cheng patted Feng Na on the shoulder and laughed. "Nana, congratulations. Your fan club has gained another hardcore member." Jiang Shuxiu asked curiously, "Senior, you too?" Feng Na glanced at Li Yundong calmly and said, "Of course. When I first saw him, I made him my idol. I'm the leader of the fan club." Jiang Shuxiu giggled. "Then I want to be the deputy leader." Cheng protested loudly. "No, I'm the deputy leader." Jiang Shuxiu saw that Cheng was her senior, so she didn't dare to argue. She had to pretend to be very wronged and said, "Then, can I be the secretary of the Youth League branch?" Secretary of the Youth League branch? Cheng and Feng Na looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Li Yundong, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry, also couldn't help laughing. He said, "By the way, Feng Na, I saw a book in Xinhua bookstore a few days ago. Was it written by you?" Feng Na had known Li Yundong for a few months. She knew that no matter how much the boy had changed, his humorous nature would not change. She smiled and said, "Which book?" Li Yundong blinked his eyes and said, "My regiment commander, my regiment." Feng Na punched Li Yundong in the arm and burst into laughter. Yes, 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 your captain, your team. Cheng Cheng burst into laughter as well. She laughed for a while, then suddenly thought of something. My leader, my team. My leader. Isn't the leader Nana? Is he hinting something to Nana? When you have a crush on someone, both men and women will subconsciously take each other's words and actions as a kind of action with incomparable meaning, and take great pains to repeatedly ponder the deep meaning. Cheng Cheng was the first to think of it, and Feng Na also quickly reacted. Her heart was thumping, and she glanced at Li Yundong. Is he hinting something to me? She thought to herself. Li Yundong didn't expect that he couldn't help but say something to make fun of them. Suddenly, the two girls began to think. Jiang Xiuxiu, who was standing to one side, saw that the two senior sisters suddenly stopped talking and were in a daze. She thought that her suggestion had provoked them, so she said, "Oh, senior sister, I just said it casually. It's okay if it's not appropriate." Feng Na came back to her senses and said with a smile, "It's okay. You can be the secretary of the Youth League branch. But the position of secretary of the Youth League branch is a little small." As she said this, she covered her mouth and laughed. Jiang Xiuxiu laughed carelessly and said, "A small official is still an official. Don't treat a bean bun like dry food." As she said this, she took Feng Na's arm in a very familiar manner and looked as if she was going to marry Feng Na. "Senior sister, I'll follow you from now on. When you become the president of the student union in the future, you have to protect me." Feng Na's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't told Jiang Xiuxiu about her specific position in the student union, let alone that the president of the student union was going to abdicate this year and that she was going to run for it. It could be seen that this girl was very scheming. As soon as she arrived, she had inquired about all kinds of things in the school. She was a person who was very good at currying favor, but her means of currying favor were not so disgusting. Feng Na smiled and said, "Okay, I need your support." Seeing that Feng Na didn't deny it, Jiang Xiuxiu was immediately overjoyed. Thinking that she had found a backer, she raised her chin at Li Yundong arrogantly and said, "See? This is called bearing." Li Yundong smiled slightly and didn't bother to argue with her. He looked at Feng Na and said, "Are you going to be the president of the student union?" Feng Na nodded and sighed slightly. "Yes, I'm in my senior year. It's my last year. I'm going to run for the president of the student union. It can be considered as adding a stroke to my graduation resume." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "That's a good thing. When the time comes, I will do my best to support you." Feng Na laughed and said, "Really? Then I really have to thank you in advance. I really have something to trouble you with." Li Yundong said exaggeratedly, "No way. I was just being polite. Did you really take it seriously?" Feng Na laughed and said, "Of course. Since you've asked, a gentleman will naturally keep his word. Wouldn't I be a fool if I didn't quickly make a decision?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Well, I know. In the future, I won't open my mouth even if you beat me to death." Feng Na chuckled and said, "Don't look so aggrieved. The freshman welcome party is in a few days. How about you come to contribute a program?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Me? In what name will I contribute a program? Don't bring up the Taekwondo club again." Feng Na pursed her lips and smiled. "You just said that you would do your best to support me, and now you want to back out? No way." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "I said that I would do my best to support you as the president of the student union. I didn't say that I would go to the freshman welcome party." Jiang Xiuxiu, who had been listening for a while, couldn't help but speak up for Feng Na. "Why is it so difficult to ask you for a favor? When I asked you for your name, you didn't tell me. But when the future president of the student union condescended to ask you for help, you didn't even give me face. What do you mean? Hey, are you out of stock? I think you're all brawn and no brain. At most, you can perform something like splitting a wooden board or breaking a rock with your chest. In order to flatter Feng Na, Jiang Xiuxiu's words were a little rude. But when she mentioned something interesting about Li Yundong, both Feng Na and Ching Ching burst into laughter. The tension immediately dissipated, and Li Yundong couldn't help but chuckle. Feng Na laughed and said, "See? Even my righteous words can't make you turn over a new leaf." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay, okay. You guys are good. I can't beat you in an argument. As long as you become the president of the student union, I will participate in the performance. But let me say this first, don't mess with me like last time." Feng Na and Ching Ching burst into laughter again. Only those who had experienced the funny thing about Li Yundong could understand the humor in this kind of laughter. Jiang Xiuxiu laughed dryly, but in her heart, she was rolling her eyes. Are these people crazy? What's so funny, /om/? Chapter 201. Go to watch net. Feng Na and Ching Ching laughed for a while. Feng Na held back her laughter and said, "We were so busy chatting that we forgot to eat. Let's go for lunch first." After that, she looked at Jiang Xiuxiu and said with a smile, "Why don't you join us?" Jiang Xiuxiu wanted to curry favor with this senior sister who had a certain amount of influence in the school, so she smiled and said, "Sure, sure." They went out of the school gate and went to the restaurant. However, when they arrived at the restaurant, they found that they had wasted their time chatting at the bottom of the teaching building. As a result, the restaurant was already full of people, and there was a row of students waiting for a table at the entrance. Watch net. 7KOM. Net. Super_speed. More. New Jiang Xiuxiu couldn't help but click her tongue. Wow, so many people. Feng Na smiled bitterly. The business here is getting better and better. Is Sichuan cuisine really that good? Ching Ching teased, "Nonsense, even a Jiangxia person like you came to eat, what do you think? Let's go back to the cafeteria for lunch. No matter how many people there are, we don't have to worry about not being able to eat." Feng Na hesitated for a moment. "How about I treat you to lunch at the cafeteria?" "That's not very good, is it?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "That's nothing. It's not like I haven't eaten it before." Li Yundong was talking about the last time he had eaten with President Chao, Zhou Qin, and the others in the cafeteria. Feng Na and Ching Ching both remembered the scene of Li Yundong singing with all his heart at that time, and they immediately smiled. Feng Na smiled and said, "All right then, let's go to the cafeteria. I hope there's still food left." Jiang Xiuxiu had thought she could freeload a good meal, but she didn't expect to be sent back to the cafeteria. She was a little unhappy in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. Instead, she smiled and said, "Okay, okay. This is the first time I've eaten in this school's cafeteria. I wonder how the food is." Seeing that she did not object, Feng Na smiled and said, "Then let's go home." After that, the four of them turned around and walked towards the school cafeteria. At this time, the school cafeteria was still crowded with people. As soon as Li Yundong, Feng Na, and the others entered the cafeteria, some of the older students recognized Li Yundong. They immediately made way for him, even lowering their voices. When Jiang Xiuxiu saw them enter the cafeteria, the people around them looked at them with admiration. No matter how arrogant she was, she knew that these people couldn't be looking at her, but she also felt that these people couldn't be looking at this arrogant boy, so she took it for granted that these people must be looking at Feng Na. Watch net. 7KOM. Jiang Xiuxiu couldn't help but sigh, "Senior sister, there are so many people who know you in this school." Feng Na hadn't realized the true meaning of Jiang Xiuxiu's words. She said casually, "It's all right. After all, I've been here for 3 years. I'm familiar with them. Jiang Xiuxiu saw that wherever they went, people would make way for them. Even their voices were much lower. It was like a lord inspecting his territory, or a mafia boss patrolling his territory. It was really cool. Senior Sister Feng Na, Cheng Cheng exclaimed. I just realized how prestigious you are. Wherever you go, people will make way for you. You're amazing. Feng Na was stunned. Of course, she knew who these people were in awe of. Feng Na opened her mouth and was about to explain, but Cheng Cheng quietly pinched her waist. Feng Na turned her head to look at Cheng Cheng, only to see the mischievous look in Cheng Cheng's eyes. Cheng Cheng shook her head at her. Feng Na suppressed her laughter and didn't say what she was going to say. After the 4 of them bought the food and sat down, Jiang Xiuxiu still couldn't stop sighing with emotion, so powerful, so awesome. Today, I finally see what a big sister is. It's really awesome. I don't know when I can get to such a level. Feng Na glanced at Li Yundong and saw that he was calm and didn't introduce himself. She held back her laughter and said, fortunately, I'm not a big deal. Li Yundong is the real power here. He is the local bully here. As she said this, Feng Na tapped Li Yundong's plate with her chopsticks. Hey, don't you think so? Li Yundong looked at Feng Na helplessly. Yes, yes, yes. Jiang Xiuxiu opened her mouth wide, her face full of longing. Senior sister, you're already so cool. What about Li Yundong? Isn't he like an emperor on a trip? Isn't he like an emperor on a trip? Will he be worshipped by hundreds of officials? Cheng Cheng couldn't help but burst out laughing, almost spitting out the rice in her mouth. She coughed hard, waved her hand, and said to Jiang Xiuxiu, sorry, I choked. Seeing her like this, Jiang Xiuxiu couldn't help but wonder, was what I just said so funny? Why are these guys so weird? As Feng Na patted Cheng Cheng's back, she said to Li Yundong mischievously, hey, is Li Yundong's trip that exaggerated? Li Yundong smiled bitterly. How could it be that exaggerated? Jiang Xiuxiu was unhappy. How is it exaggerated? You can't bear to see him being more prestigious than you, can you? Can't bear to see him being more prestigious than you. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I didn't say that. I just think that, ahem, you're praising him too much. Jiang Xiuxiu was excited. She said, isn't he more prestigious than you? Isn't he more prestigious than you? What can you do that he can do? Li Yundong smiled bitterly. Yes, yes, he's more prestigious than me. Go to the internet. 7 K.O.M. Jiang Xiuxiu snorted. Just as she was about to speak again, she suddenly heard a surprised voice next to her. Li Yundong. As they spoke, Li Yundong, Feng Na, and Cheng Cheng all looked in the direction of the voice. Jiang Xiuxiu suddenly stood up, her heart beating wildly. Li Yundong. Where is Li Yundong? Li Yundong saw 2 girls standing in front of him. One was wearing a famous brand dress and was dressed fashionably. Although the other was also dressed very beautifully, she had a slim figure and a delicate face, which revealed a different kind of charm. Li Yundong recognized the girl. He was suddenly stunned. Wasn't this the girl who danced at the party last time? He said, you're Zhuang Hui. Zhuang Hui smiled, picked up her plate, and asked, can I sit down? Feng Na, who was standing next to Zhuang Hui, couldn't help but say, don't you think it's very crowded here? Kolu, who was standing next to Zhuang Hui, couldn't help but snort. Let's go, Hui Hui. There's nothing to say to them. Then she turned around and left with her plate. Zhuang Hui glanced at her and sighed. Seeing that Kolu had made up her mind to leave, Zhuang Hui had no choice but to turn her head helplessly and look at Li Yundong. Can I treat you to dinner next time? Before Li Yundong could say anything, Feng Na sneered. People who want to treat him to a meal are lining up all the way to Beijing. A trace of anger flashed in Zhuang Hui's eyes. She glared at Feng Na and left. Li Yundong looked at Feng Na in surprise. Do you have a grudge against her? Feng Na looked at Li Yundong apologetically and forced a smile. I'm sorry. I lost control of my emotions. Ching Cheng, his best friend, laughed and said, they are sworn enemies. Women always have one or two sworn enemies who don't see eye to eye with each other. You know what I mean. Li Yundong didn't know Zhuang Hui very well, so he didn't take it to heart. He just smiled and said nothing. However, Jiang Shuxiu stared at them with her eyes wide open. She couldn't help saying, hey, slow down. Jiang Shuxiu pointed at Li Yundong and said, are you Li Yundong? No way. How could you be Li Yundong? Li Yundong laughed. Why can't I be Li Yundong? Jiang Shuxiu suddenly felt a little crazy. She looked at Feng Na and Ching Cheng in exasperation, wanting to confirm it with them. But she saw that Feng Na and Ching Cheng were already smiling shiftily. Jiang Shuxiu suddenly felt like her head was going to explode. Oh no, I'm so embarrassed this time. Jiang Shuxiu already knew in her heart that the boy in front of her was most likely Li Yundong, but she still asked unwillingly, are you Li Yundong? Before Li Yundong had time to speak, he suddenly heard a boy not far behind him say, Hongling, what's so good about this school? The teachers are poor, the teachers are not famous, there are no good majors, and there are no good tutors. Look, the food in the cafeteria is not good. Bah, what is this fried food? It tastes terrible. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. Hongling. He immediately turned his head to look at the boy who had spoken. Sure enough, sitting opposite the boy was a beautiful girl with a ponytail. Her forehead was full and bright, and her eyes were bright. She looked confident and proud. Who else could it be but Wan Hongling? Why is she in this school? Li Yundong suddenly widened his eyes. Hearing the boy in front of her talking, Wan Hongling couldn't help but slap the table and stand up. She shouted angrily, Yan Hua, are you done? I didn't ask you to study here with me. Tsinghua and Peking University are good. You can study there. Why are you dawdling here? Why are you talking so much nonsense? The students who had heard Yan Hua slander Tiannan University before heard Wan Hongling's words and immediately cheered and said loudly, well said. There were also some people who sneered, I'm afraid you won't be able to get in. Yan Hua turned his head and glared at these people. He said arrogantly and rudely, you haven't even heard of my name. Don't you know the name of this year's college entrance examination champion in Tiannan City? Do I care about this lousy school? Tsinghua and Peking University begged me to go, but I didn't. I'm going with Hongling. Do you have a problem with that? After that, he turned his head and smiled obsequiously like a bullied wife. He said in a low voice, I'm just saying. Don't take it seriously. Don't be angry. I just don't understand. With your grades, you can easily get into Peking University or Tsinghua University. Why do you want to study in this school? Wan Hongling was angry in her heart. This boy had pestered her from junior high school to high school, all the way to college. It was like he was possessed by a ghost. Wan Hongling was so angry that she was about to curse, but she suddenly seemed to feel a sharp and bright gaze looking at her. Her heart skipped a beat. She followed the gaze and immediately saw Li Yundong. There were several reasons why Wan Hongling had come to this university. It was not only because this university was in the city where she cultivated, but also because it was relatively peaceful. Moreover, she could help Li Yundong cultivate at a close distance. Most importantly, Sister Zi Yuan's sweetheart was here. This guy looked like a very lascivious man, so she had to help her Shiji keep a close eye on him. When Wan Hongling saw Li Yundong, she was happy at first, but soon she saw Feng Na, Cheng Cheng, and Jiang Xiuxiu beside him. She suddenly became furious and thought, I knew this guy was lascivious. It's only his first day at school, and he's already hooking up with 3 beautiful women. Damn it, really damn it. Wan Hongling sneered and said to Yan Hua, do you want to know why I came to this school? Yan Hua nodded and said, yes. Wan Hongling pointed to Li Yundong and said without thinking, I came to this school because of him. This was also the truth, but when it was said at this time, it really made people's imagination run wild. Li Yundong was suddenly shocked and couldn't help but shout, hey, Hongling, what nonsense are you talking about? Yan Hua heard this, huh? You even called her Hongling? Bastard, this is a name that only I can call her. What right do you have to call her that? Yan Hua suddenly became jealous. He turned around and looked at Li Yundong with his head tilted. He said with a disdainful sneer, are you Li Yundong? Strongly recommend Hai Chen's new book, Blood Evil Demon, welcome children to take a look /om/. Chapter 202. Go to watch net. As the saying goes, when a person is unlucky, even cold water will get stuck. Li Yundong felt that he was feeling a little bit like this now. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the furious and jealous Yan Hua and said, she and I are just ordinary friends. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. After saying that, he felt that it was inappropriate. What ordinary friends? This stinky girl also hurt a girl, and I haven't settled the score with her yet. I just didn't make trouble for her for Zi Yuan's sake. Li Yundong said again, well, we're not ordinary friends. It would have been better if Li Yundong hadn't said this, but as soon as he said it, there was a suspicion that he had confessed. Yan Hua snorted and sneered, so it seems that you are very close friends. Seeing this guy pestering him like a mad dog, Li Yundong couldn't help but feel angry in his heart, but he didn't want to cause trouble. He had killed young Master He with a bolt of lightning, and the heavenly tribulation hadn't passed yet. At this time, it was really not good to cause trouble. Li Yundong couldn't help but say angrily to Wan Hongling, hey, what are you doing? Don't cause trouble for me. Yan Hua suddenly became furious. He rushed over and pushed Li Yundong with both hands, shouting, are you a man or not? Why are you angry at a girl? If you have the guts, come at me. Seeing him make a move, Li Yundong snorted coldly and waved his hand. Yan Hua's whole body suddenly flew up like a kite. Everyone saw Li Yundong raise his arm, and without much force, Yan Hua flew more than a meter high and 4 or 5 meters away. As soon as Wan Hongling saw Yan Hua fly up, she was also afraid that Li Yundong would cause trouble, so she jumped over. Her figure was elegant and graceful, and her clothes fluttered in the wind as she caught Yan Hua. As the saying goes, the layman watches the fun, while the expert knows the ropes. These students only felt that Wan Hongling was agile and light. With a flash of her figure, she had already pressed down on Yan Hua's shoulder and stood 4 or 5 meters away, just like a hidden martial arts master. They suddenly cheered loudly one by one. Some of them were so excited that their eyes were shining. Some of them even had the titles of the posts at the top of the gossip section of the school forum, Beautiful Freshman vs. Legend, Is the Beautiful Girl Stronger, or Li Yundong is Stronger? Extra, Li Yundong's mysterious lover emerges, for the unforgettable love, he gave up the call of a famous school to follow the footsteps of love, beauty, top scholar, legend, that unspeakable love triangle, watch net. These laymen were all here to watch a good show. Some of them even shouted excitedly, fight! Go and fight! However, Li Yundong could tell from Wan Hongling's elegant figure that she had a solid basic skills. Moreover, when she took on Yan Hua, she did it with ease. She did have the demeanor of a disciple of a famous family. He was secretly praising her in his heart, but what Wan Hongling said next almost made his nose crooked. After Wan Hongling caught Yan Hua, she patted him on the shoulder and said, "Are you crazy? Why did you fight with him? Are you his match?" Yan Hua's face turned purple and he said, "A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists." Some of the students nearby looked disdainful. "Humph, it seems that you were the first one to fight just now." Wan Hongling had fought with Li Yundong before, and both times she had been completely defeated. Later, they had quarreled, but she hadn't gained any advantage with her mouth. Every time she thought of this, she gnashed her teeth with hatred. Hearing Yan Hua's words, Wan Hongling sneered and said, "If you can beat him with your mouth, I'll give up." "You're good." Yan Hua was overjoyed when he heard this. "Really?" After that, he puffed out his chest and said to Li Yundong arrogantly, "Li Yundong, do you dare to debate with me?" When Yan Hua was in high school, he had represented the school in the national debate competition and won the title of the best debater. He was extremely good at talking. Moreover, he had read all kinds of books since he was a child, so he had a lot of knowledge. He was very conceited about his debating skills and looked down on this student from a third-rate university. However, Li Yundong was a person who disdained to talk with others. If he met someone like Wu Hao who tried to kill him and steal his treasures, he would immediately kill him and his soul without saying a word. He had even attracted the punishment of heavenly thunder to young Master He and destroyed the body and soul of the high-ranking official. It could be said that he was cruel and merciless. How could he be disdainful to argue with Yan Hua? Li Yundong ignored Yan Hua and just glared at Wan Hongling. In his opinion, this girl was purely looking for trouble. She knew that he wanted to cultivate quietly, but she still made trouble for him. It was simply hateful. "Wan Hongling!" Li Yundong shouted angrily, "Are you asking for a beating again? Why are you fanning the flames for no reason?" He spoke unintentionally, but the others were listening attentively. "Hey, why again?" When Wan Hongling saw Li Yundong glaring at her, she couldn't help but feel timid and subconsciously took a step back. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. This boy had completely defeated her before he had reached the Zhuji phase. Now that he had reached the Zhuji phase, there was no need to mention it. When Yan Hua saw Wan Hongling looking at Li Yundong with fear in her eyes, he suddenly felt angry and jealous. He was angry because Li Yundong seemed to have really taught Wan Hongling a lesson before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said the word again. He was jealous because Li Yundong had treated her like this, but Wan Hongling had accompanied him to this third-rate school. He had flattered her and tried to please her, but she hadn't even smiled at him. Was there any justice in this world? Was there any law? Yan Hua puffed out his chest and said loudly, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Wan Hongling sneered and thought to herself, "Who do you think you are? You're just a bookworm." Although Li Yundong is hateful, he is the successor of the Jindan stage. Even Sister Zi Yuan has to praise him for his talent in cultivation. How can a fool like you compare to him? Hearing her sneer, Yan Hua immediately felt that he had been underestimated. He hated her in his heart and shouted at Li Yundong, "What's the point of bullying a girl? If you have the ability, come at me." Li Yundong was so angry that he burst out laughing. "Is bullying a bookworm like you considered a skill?" Li Yundong said. Yan Hua sneered and was about to refute when he saw Wan Hongling turn around and walk out of the cafeteria. Yan Hua didn't care about arguing with Li Yundong. He immediately turned around and chased after her. "Hey, don't go, Hongling. Where are you going?" Wan Hongling turned her head and shouted at him, "Bookworm, it's none of your business where I go. Don't follow me. I'm very annoyed by you." As she said this, she quickly walked out of the cafeteria. Yan Hua looked aggrieved. "Hey, why do you also call me a bookworm?" Wan Hongling stopped, put her hands on her hips, and said loudly, "Yes, you are not a bookworm. You are a fool." You are an idiot. Do you understand? Yan Hua was stunned for a moment. What did I do to offend you? Hey, don't go. Tell me clearly. What did I say wrong or do wrong? The two of them walked further and further away. Li Yundong looked at their backs and shook his head. He snorted in his heart, then sat down again and ate his rice in a depressed manner. Feng Na, who was standing to one side, pretended to be deep and said, Alas, Li Yundong, why do you get into trouble wherever you go? Li Yundong couldn't help but cry out, It's none of my business. Ching Ching clenched her fists and made a girl's prayer gesture. She said with a smile, Do you think that trouble can't find you if you keep a low profile? It's useless. A man like you is like a firefly in the dark no matter where you are. You are so bright and outstanding. Your melancholy eyes, elegant hair, outstanding figure, and the braised ribs in the rice bowl in front of you have deeply fascinated me. Before she could finish speaking, Feng Na burst out laughing. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing as well. He pointed at Ching Ching and Feng Na with his chopsticks and said, You too, you just want to see the world in chaos. At this time, he noticed that Jiang Xiuxiu, who was beside him, had been staring at him in shock. He smiled apologetically and said, Sit down. Why aren't you eating? Jiang Xiuxiu's body shook, and she reacted as if she had just woken up from a dream. She remembered what she had said in front of Li Yundong, and her face suddenly turned red. She didn't even eat, covered her face, and rushed out. Li Yundong looked at her back and opened his mouth, wanting to stop her, but Feng Na couldn't help laughing and said, Forget it, don't shout. She will only be embarrassed if she stays. Who told her to mistake Feng Jing for Ma Liang? Li Yundong glared at her. Isn't it all your prank? Feng Na immediately cried out, It's none of my business. She didn't give me a chance to speak. Li Yundong laughed and scolded, You're in the right. Do you still want me to support you to be the president of the student union? Be careful that I don't vote for you. Feng Na immediately smiled apologetically. Don't be like that. They chatted and laughed. When Li Yundong was about to finish eating, he suddenly remembered something. He asked, By the way, have you seen Zhou Qin? Feng Na was stunned for a moment. Zhou Qin? Isn't she in your class? Why are you asking me? Li Yundong said, I haven't seen her all day, and I don't know why. Feng Na said carelessly, Maybe she has something to do. Li Yundong couldn't help frowning as he thought about what had happened between him and Zhou Qin. I wonder how Zhou Qin is doing. Could it be that my matter brought her a lot of trouble? Li Yundong wasn't worried that Zhou Qin would betray him. He knew that this girl had a strong character and would keep her word. As long as she said something, she would definitely do it. Her manner of doing things was really not inferior to that of a man. Moreover, if Zhou Qin had betrayed him, he would have been on the run all over the world. How could he sit here and eat in peace? Alas, I owe her a big favor. Li Yundong thought to himself and couldn't help sighing. Feng Na couldn't help but ask, What's wrong? Is there something on your mind? Does it have something to do with Zhou Qin? Li Yundong didn't want to tell the two girls in front of him about this, not because he didn't trust them, but because if he told them, it would cause them great trouble. Zhou Qin could rely on her strong background to survive, and at worst, he could rely on his own skills to become a wild cultivator. But these two girls, who had no background, were bound to die miserably. Li Yundong shook his head and said, It's nothing. I just have something to ask her. Feng Na said, Maybe she'll be back in a few days. Don't worry. But Li Yundong didn't know why, but he always had a vague feeling that something was wrong. He sighed slightly and said, I hope so, /om/. Chapter 203. Go to watch net. After Li Yundong finished his meal, he read the new books in the classroom in the afternoon. In the evening, after school, he went to the library to borrow 2 more books. The speed at which he read shocked the old man in the library. He couldn't help but ask a few more questions, but Li Yundong answered all of them fluently. Only then did the old man admit defeat. He shook his head and sighed, then went to get the books for Li Yundong. Watch net. 7 KOM. The next day, Li Yundong found that Zhou Qin was still nowhere to be found in the classroom. He went to Sun Li and the homeroom teacher to ask about her, but they both gave him the same answer, no idea. Li Yundong found it more and more strange. She has never skipped class for no reason before, has she? After school in the afternoon, Li Yundong took his bank card to the bank with the intention of giving it a try. As a result, he was surprised to find that all the empty accounts in his card had been filled up, and there was more than 10,000 yuan in his account. Li Yundong was very surprised. He immediately raised the card in his hand and asked Zi Yuan, "Will you help me pay back the money on the card?" Zi Yuan was meditating in the living room. She sat cross-legged, pinched her fingers, and put the back of her hand on the inside of her thigh. She looked serene and calm, with a kind of graceful beauty. She did not open her eyes and said lightly, "Yes." "Why would you help me pay back the money?" Zi Yuan said, "If you want to cultivate, how can you do it without money? People who worry about their livelihood all day long will never be able to calm their hearts and cultivate." Li Yundong felt that what Zi Yuan said was very reasonable, but he was very upset in his heart. He was a dignified man, but he actually needed a woman to help him. How could he bear it? He made up his mind that he had to be self-reliant in the future. Not only did he have to make rapid progress in cultivation, but he also had to have his own career. He couldn't rely on other people's help all day long. However, Li Yundong also knew very well that now was not the time to show off his lofty and unyielding character. Otherwise, he would really have to go hungry. As Zi Yuan had said, if a cultivator had a problem eating 3 meals a day, how could he cultivate? Magic, wealth, companion, earth, artifact. Among them, earth required a lot of money to support, not to mention the last magical item. Wu Hao had once offered 20 million yuan for Li Yundong's psychic fan of 7 treasures. From this, it could be seen that the matter of magical artifacts was the real burning of money. Li Yundong was not pretentious. He nodded and said to Zi Yuan, "Well, I'll borrow it from you first. I'll return it to you later." Watch net. Zi Yuan smiled but still didn't open her eyes and didn't speak. Net. Super_speed. More. Knew seeing that she was cultivating, Li Yundong didn't disturb her too much. He closed the door and left. After he left, she slowly opened her eyes and gave him a meaningful look. A playful smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and then she slowly closed her eyes. The first thing Li Yundong did was to withdraw 2,000 yuan from the bank and fill his wallet to the brim. He patted his wallet and suddenly felt a sense of security. He sighed to himself. Money is a hero's courage. This is really good, he thought to himself. Although money is not omnipotent, and it can't directly buy shintong or powerful force, without money, I can't even carry out the most basic cultivation. Even if I want to treat someone to a meal, I have to think about it for a long time in my heart. Now that I have money, I feel that I have the confidence to talk to people. The so-called rich and overbearing is not unreasonable. Li Yundong said self-deprecatingly, then went straight to the mobile phone store. Although Li Yundong had sold his mobile phone on the road of cultivation, he had kept the SIM card inside. He had picked up a mobile phone that he liked in the mall and inserted the SIM card that he had kept for a long time into it. He had immediately dialed Su Chan's number, but a voice came from the other end of the line. The number you have dialed is not in the service area. Please try again later. Damn. No way. Li Yundong immediately looked at the phone and couldn't help but curse in a low voice. Did this girl go into the deep mountains and wild forests? Li Yundong had no choice but to send a text message to Su Chan. Girl, I saw the note you left me. I miss you very much. I have succeeded in the Zhuji phase. When I pass the heavenly tribulation, I will come to pick you up. Where are you now? After Li Yundong finished writing the text message and sent it out, he picked up his mobile phone, found Zhou Qin's number in the phone book, and dialed it. But when Li Yundong dialed, there was also a voice on the phone. Sorry, the number you have dialed is not available. Why, you? Before the voice finished speaking, Li Yundong couldn't help but look at his mobile phone in astonishment and muttered, it's so strange. Why can't I find these two people? This is really strange. Just as Li Yundong was feeling strange, in a military compound in Tiannan City, Zhou Qin was being bombarded by a terrible storm. Comrade Zhou Qin, I think it is necessary for me to remind you that as the only witness of the case and the descendant of an official in the system, you should know very well that if you cover up for others, resist stubbornly, and go against the party and the country, you will not end well. In a room with only a table, a few chairs, and a dazzling table lamp, a man in a gray Chinese tunic suit was slamming the table and scolding loudly. Next to him was a woman who was taking notes. She was wearing a black business suit. Watch net. 7 KOM. Color asterisk caret asterisk literature underscore learning % super hashtag speed. Update. In the whole room, there was only one window behind Zhou Qin, and it was covered with thick curtains, not letting any light in. It was dark all around, and the atmosphere was oppressive and dull. Only Zhou Qin was illuminated by the dazzling light, and her face looked very pale. The mysterious disappearance of young Master He had caused a terrible earthquake in the entire Tiannan city. Young Master He's father was a provincial governor. How big of a deal was it that his son had disappeared? During the whole process of young Master He's mysterious disappearance, Li Yundong, Zhou Qin, and Ding Nan were important people who had contact with him on video. As for Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Wan Hongling, because they were cultivators, they went up and down along the way and were not recorded by the surveillance cameras on the road at all. At the beginning, the investigators had locked onto Li Yundong through the surveillance cameras on the road. But when they investigated the scene, they were surprised to find that although there were footprints of young Master He and the others at the scene, there were no clues left behind. There was only a big pit that had been struck by lightning. It was as if young Master He had evaporated into thin air after being struck by lightning. Young Master He's family refused to believe this result. After more than a month of searching, the investigators finally had no choice but to announce that the missing young Master He was most likely dead. Li Yundong was a major suspect. But the problem was that although Li Yundong had appeared at the scene and there was video evidence to prove that he had been chasing after young Master He, there was no direct evidence to prove that Li Yundong was the murderer. Unless this boy could attract lightning and kill young Master He. But as soon as this idea was put forward by the task force, it was scoffed at. Are you kidding me? Our party believes in atheism. How could you come up with such a fantastical thing? Where is your party platform? Where is your party spirit? But at this point, the case could no longer be investigated. It had entered a dead zone. Moreover, when the task force was investigating Li Yundong's identity and whereabouts, they faintly felt that there was a force secretly preventing them from investigating the case. Those who worked in the system were very sensitive. Those who dared to go against the governor must be of the same level or even higher. In this way, the task force felt that they were in a dilemma and wanted to give up. But the He family didn't think so. Their only son was dead. Although he had done a lot of evil things when he was alive, death was the most important thing. Now, they couldn't see him, and they couldn't see his corpse. The most hateful thing was that they didn't know whether he was alive or dead, let alone how he had died. Therefore, the He family's attitude was to investigate. We must get to the bottom of it and find out the truth. However, there was a lot of resistance to directly investigating Li Yundong. Moreover, Li Yundong's whereabouts were unknown, as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. Therefore, the task force couldn't help but think, why do we have to go far? Therefore, they turned their attention to Zhou Qin. This daughter of the Zhou family had witnessed the whole process of the case from the beginning to the end. She must know the whole story. As long as they pried open her mouth, they would definitely be able to solve this case. There was no doubt that the detectives of the task force had indeed grasped the main contradiction, but they did not expect that Zhou Qin would be much more difficult to deal with than they had imagined. From the beginning to the end, Zhou Qin told almost no lies. She told them in detail that young master he had tried to drug Ding Nan, and then tried to attack Deng Yu and Deng Jiao. In the end, the two girls had fallen from the building and died one after another. Then, she told them that young master he had fled because of fear, and Li Yundong had chased him all the way because of righteous indignation. On the way, young master he had caused the death of an old woman because of a car accident, and she had shot a young man and continued to flee. In the beginning, the task force did not have any objections to these things, because there was a lot of evidence to prove this point. However, when Zhou Qin reached the most critical point, she deliberately ignored the fact that the thunder was caused by Li Yundong. Instead, she only said that young master he's actions had provoked the wrath of God, who had sent down thunder to strike him to death. When the task force heard this, they immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. They held the confession in a daze, as if they were holding a hot potato. Well, from this confession, young master he was simply the most unredeemable person in the world. Even God could not stand it anymore and struck him to death with a bolt of lightning. If the He family knew about this confession, wouldn't they fly into a rage? The members of the task force questioned Zhou Qin loudly about the authenticity of her words, but Zhou Qin insisted on it. She sneered and said something important, if I can attract heavenly thunder, I will definitely use heavenly thunder to kill this beast. When the member of the task force heard this, he immediately asked, do you want to kill him? This sentence was very dangerous. If Zhou Qin denied it, it would be fine, but as long as Zhou Qin admitted it, she would immediately be listed as an important criminal suspect and interrogated because she had a motive to kill. It was not that Zhou Qin did not know the danger of this sentence, but she said without hesitation, of course, everyone has the right to kill a medical beast like him. The special agent shouted, why do you hate him so much? Zhou Qin said angrily, go and see what he has done before you ask me this question. If it were you, what would you think if you saw your classmate die in front of you because he could not stand his insults? The special agent shouted again, you hate him so much. Did you kill him? Zhou Qin sneered and said, I also hate the Japanese. So many people die in Japan every day. Did I kill them too? Zhou Qin's tough attitude gave the task force a headache. This girl was like a copper pea that could not be smashed, cooked, or flattened. Moreover, like young master she was also the descendant of a high-ranking official. Naturally, they could not use those methods to extort a confession from her. The commissioners of the task force were in a dilemma for a while, and the case did not make any progress. However, the wisdom of humans was endless. A living person would not be suffocated to death by peeing. At that moment, a commissioner had an idea. He proposed to use a move of Tai Chi and throw the report in his hand to the He family and let them decide. This move worked. After the report was handed over to the He family, the case immediately turned for the better. After reading Zhou Qin's confession, the He family immediately flew into a rage. Young master He's father directed all his anger at Zhou Qin and the Zhou family. He even cursed, the Zhou family made my He family die, so I won't let them have a good time. Then, a political earthquake occurred. The He family quickly contacted their allies and attacked their old friend, the Zhou family, at lightning speed. In the system, who didn't have some dirty things under their butts? Soon, Zhou Kachang's younger brother was arrested for corruption and bribery. Zhou Kachang himself was implicated and was punished by the Commission for Discipline Inspection. Zhou Qin was quickly transferred to the military region and closely monitored. The Zhou family personally sent 2 commissioners to the Tiannan military region to take over the case. 2 months ago, Zhou Qin was still a proud daughter of heaven, but in the blink of an eye, she had become a prisoner with nothing. A terrible storm was approaching this 20-year-old girl, /om/. Chapter 204. Go to Watch Network. In the eyes of the people of the task force, it would not take long for a high-ranking official like Zhou Qin to tell the truth after she had lost her power. Go to the Watch Net. 7 KOM. In the past, she had refused to tell the truth. She must have relied on her family background. But now, she was a fallen phoenix. It would not take long for her to tell them everything clearly. But the fact was that Zhou Qin's stubbornness and tenacity had seriously exceeded everyone's expectations. In the face of the aggressive questioning from the man in the Chinese tunic suit, Zhou Qin endured the torture of not eating for 3 days and not sleeping for 2 days. She raised her eyes, looked at the man in front of her coldly, and said, "I'm telling the truth. If you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do." The man in the Chinese tunic suit slammed the table angrily, pulled out the notebook of the recorder beside him, and threw it in front of Zhou Qin. He shouted, "Look at it clearly. You said that young master he was killed by lightning?" Zhou Qin didn't even look at it and said lightly, "Yes." The man in the Chinese tunic suit said angrily, "How could he be killed by lightning there? Who in the world would believe it? What is your intention for protecting Li Jiandong like this?" Zhou Qin suddenly snorted and raised her head. "Why are you so diligent in investigating less cases? What is your intention?" Although Zhou Qin was so weak that she was gasping for breath after saying a few words, her eyes were full of disdain and unyieldingness. This girl seemed to never know what compromise was and what surrender was. The man in the Chinese tunic suit said angrily, "Zhou Qin, I'm warning you for the last time. Don't play with fire." Zhou Qin sneered and said, "This is the 4th time you've said something like this." The man in the Chinese tunic suit was furious. He subconsciously wanted to lose his temper, but from the corner of his eyes, he saw the recorder beside him pursing her lips and snickering. These days, those who could enter the Commission for Discipline Inspection as a recorder were definitely not easy to deal with. The background behind them was more and more powerful. The man in the Chinese tunic suit didn't dare to scold her. He just snorted angrily and left. Seeing him leave, the recorder packed up her documents and stood up to follow him out. But before she left, she turned her head and looked at Zhou Qin curiously, her eyes full of confusion. Previously, this girl had been stubborn because she believed that the power and background behind her wouldn't do anything to her. But now, her father had fallen from power. Where did her support come from? Where did her tenacity come from? After the door was closed, Zhou Qin's cold eyes slowly retracted, but she did not show the slightest sign of relief. She still leaned against the chair and lowered her eyes, so that no one could see the emotional changes and psychological activities in her eyes. Watch Net. Zhou Qin knew that there were several cameras watching her in this room. Her every move was being watched. As long as she showed the slightest sign of weakness, they would take advantage of it. Zhou Qin was a girl who was very good at observing and thinking about people's hearts. She naturally understood the meaning of the curious glance that the scribe cast at her before he left. In fact, it wasn't just the recorder who didn't understand. Sometimes, even Zhou Qin herself didn't understand. Why did he persist like this? For the so-called justice? What kind of joke was this? He had grown up in the system and had long seen through everything. There was no good, evil, beauty, or ugliness in this world, only eternal benefits. But if it wasn't for justice, then what was she doing it for? For Li Yundong. Ah, that should be it. If it wasn't for him, why had she been stubborn until now? But, Zhou Qin, was it worth it? Is it worth it? Zhou Qin's red lips parted slightly, and she couldn't help but mutter to herself in a low voice. She suddenly remembered that when she had called Li Yundong to introduce him to a job, she had looked at herself in the mirror and made a conclusion. Zhou Qin, you've fallen in love with such a boy. In the future, you will suffer. However, she had never thought that the suffering would be so great, so bitter. Her family had even been destroyed in a day. Was it all worth it? Although the expression on Zhou Qin's face was as cold as frost, she couldn't help but smile bitterly in her heart. If this boy is as devoted to me as he is to Su Chan, then everything I do for him will be worth it. No matter how much suffering I have to suffer, I will gladly endure it. Zhou Qin thought. But he doesn't like you, Zhou Qin. Is it worth it to do this for a boy who doesn't like you? A big question mark appeared in Zhou Qin's mind. At this moment, Zhou Qin's heart suddenly moved, and she felt a little confused. Watch net. Color ** literature _learning % super #speed. Update. Just as she was feeling lost, the door was suddenly pushed open with a creak. Zhou Qin raised her head and was surprised to find that the person who came in was her father. Zhou Qin raised her eyebrows, and her blank and weak expression was instantly hidden behind a cold and hard mask. She sneered coldly and said, "Why is it you? Didn't you get arrested?" In fact, Zhou Qin knew the answer to this question very well. She just couldn't help but mock her father, who was usually high and mighty. Zhou Keqiang was wearing a black suit, and his body was still neat and clean. Other than the fatigue in his eyes, it was hard to tell that he was a cadre who had been investigated. Zhou Keqiang glanced at Zhou Qin, chuckled, and sat down in front of her. The organization wants me to atone for my crimes. You should understand. Of course, Zhou Qin understood. She had indeed been shaken and confused before, but the moment Zhou Keqiang appeared, her shaken heart became firm again. The task force thought that by playing the family card, Zhou Qin would be weak and yield, but in fact, this encouraged her strength and tenacity. Zhou Qin sneered and said, "It's fine if they don't know. Do you think you can convince me?" Zhou Keqiang was choked by his daughter. He sighed and said, Qin, no matter what, I am still your father, right? Can you not talk to me in such a tone?" Zhou Qin snorted coldly and turned her head away. Zhou Keqiang took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. Just as he was about to light it, he suddenly thought of something. He asked Zhou Qin, "Do you mind if I smoke?" Zhou Qin was stunned when she heard this. She couldn't help but look at Zhou Keqiang's face. Suddenly, she burst out laughing. Zhou Keqiang, this is the first time you've asked for my opinion like this in my life. It seems that you are mentally prepared to adapt to the life of an ordinary person. Zhou Keqiang was angry, but he quickly restrained himself. He sighed in his heart, the conversation between father and daughter is so full of smoke, so cold and sarcastic. It's really rare in the world. Zhou Keqiang sighed and said, Qin, don't you think you've gone a little too far this time? Not only have I been implicated by you, but your uncle has also been implicated by you. Do you want to bring our family down by yourself? Zhou Qin sneered and said, Comrade Zhou Keqiang, sooner or later you'll have to pay for what you've done. If your butts were clean, would you have ended up in such a situation? A trace of anger flashed in Zhou Keqiang's eyes. He stood up and said angrily, "You." Zhou Qin didn't give in at all. She looked at him tit for tat and said, "What? Did I say something wrong?" Zhou Keqiang took a deep breath and said, Qin, you are an adult. You have to think about what you say and do. If you continue to be so obsessed, you will no longer have a good life in the future. You will go from a high and mighty princess to a pile of mud in the ground. Zhou Qin said coldly, you don't have to worry about that. I don't care about this kind of life. I have hands and feet, and I can support myself in the future. Zhou Keqiang was annoyed and hateful when he saw that Zhou Qin was stubborn. He slapped the table and shouted, are you crazy? What nonsense are you talking about? What the hell is wrong with you? Is it because of that boy named Li Yundong? Qin, wake up, will you? I've investigated this boy. He has no interest in you at all. Is it worth it for you to ruin your family like this for him? Zhou Qin's heart suddenly trembled, and the previous question came to her mind again. A trace of sadness flashed in her eyes, but she still said stubbornly, don't call him a boy. He is much more manly than most men in this world. Zhou Keqiang said angrily, so what? Even if you have done so much for him, does he know? Will he be moved? Will he be grateful to you? Do you think that after you have done so much, he will change his mind and like you? Qin, don't be silly. He won't change his mind. This sentence was like an iron hammer, hitting Zhou Qin's heart hard and making her tremble all over. Zhou Qin couldn't help but think of what Su Chan had said to him while crying and comforting him after Li Yundong had killed He Xiao with heavenly thunder. At worst, when the divine tribulation comes, I will die with you. I have been happy with you for so many days. It's not a big deal to die. What had Li Yundong said at that time? Yes, he had said at that time, you know me best. Others say that you are a witch, but in my opinion, you are the most lovely and considerate woman in the world. How can I, Li Yundong, have a woman like you as my companion? Thinking of the scene at that time, Zhou Qin felt as if her heart was being stabbed by a knife, and tears almost fell from her eyes. There seemed to be two people in Zhou Qin's mind. One said, Zhou Qin, don't be silly. Li Yundong won't choose you. But the other said, but, Zhou Qin, don't you want to know whether this boy has you in his heart or not? If you give up everything for him, will this boy look at you more and like you a little more? This voice suddenly made Zhou Qin's heart tremble. She suddenly opened her eyes wide, like a desperate person seeing a glimmer of heaven. Zhou Qin lowered her eyes to hide the drastic changes in her inner world. However, the closest relative in front of her did not notice Zhou Qin's psychological activities at all. Zhou Qin took a deep breath and said slowly, Dad, do you remember the painting I drew at my birthday party last time? Zhou Keqiang was stunned. Yes, what about it? Zhou Qin smiled faintly. Dad, I said at that time that no matter how similar a butterfly was, it was impossible for it to fly out of this frame. Zhou Keqiang was confused. So what? Zhou Qin smiled and said, it's nothing. You won't understand, and I don't expect you to understand, because you have never understood since you were a child. Zhou Keqiang became more and more confused. What do you mean? Zhou Qin shook her head and said, it's nothing. Just think of me as a willful daughter. I've had enough of these restrictions. I want to be free to choose for myself. Zhou Keqiang stood up in shock and anger. Are you crazy? You'll regret it. Zhou Qin smiled slightly. Whether I regret it or not is my own business. It has nothing to do with you. Everyone only has one path in life. The path is walked by oneself, and it is also chosen by oneself. I will not regret it. After Zhou Qin finished speaking, she watched her desperate father walk out of the room step by step, as if he had become a statue again. Her eyes wandered around the cold and dark room. When she saw the window covered by thick curtains, her eyes stopped and she sighed faintly in her heart. Li Yundong, will you look at me again? Just as Zhou Qin had made up her mind, Li Yundong was preparing to start the cultivation of the fifth heaven of Shentong at home in Hongqing New District. /om/ Chapter 205. Go to Watch Network. After school in the afternoon, Li Yundong returned home and found Zi Yuan sitting cross-legged in the living room of his home. As soon as he entered the door, she opened her eyes. Li Yundong laughed and said, "I should charge you rent." The implication of these words was that he was making fun of Zi Yuan for staying in his home all day long. There was also a hint of ambiguity in the subtext. If it had been another girl, her heart might have skipped a beat and she would have chewed over the meaning of Li Yundong's words repeatedly. However, Zi Yuan was ethereal and said lightly, "How have you been reading these days?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Not bad." "Why? Why do you suddenly ask?" Zi Yuan didn't answer. Instead, she asked with a serious expression, "What is cultivation?" A small part of Li Yundong's cultivation kung fu had been taught by Su Chan, a small part had been learned by chance, and a small part had been taught by Zi Yuan. Although Li Yundong didn't know why Zi Yuan wanted to teach him cultivation kung fu, he subconsciously regarded Zi Yuan as his master. When Li Yundong heard Zi Yuan's question, his heart suddenly trembled and he said, "Buddha said that the world is full of suffering. I wish to seek the other side in order to be at peace. The process of seeking peace to the other side is cultivation." Zi Yuan didn't comment and asked again, "What is cultivation?" Li Yundong said, "To learn Taoism and cultivate is to seek the true self, get rid of the false and retain the true. This is cultivation." After hearing this, Zi Yuan nodded slightly, and a hint of appreciation flashed in her eyes. "Yes, I've seen you reading Buddhist classics and Taoist classics these days. I was afraid that you would be possessed by the devil and lose the distinction between Buddhism and Taoism." Li Yundong chuckled. If she had asked him these two questions a few days ago, he would have been confused and definitely regarded cultivation and Taoism as the same thing. But now, after reading many classics of Buddhism and Taoism, he could naturally distinguish them clearly. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Is it that serious? In my opinion, Buddhism focuses on cultivation, while Taoism focuses on Taoism. Although one focuses on practice and the other on truth, in fact, they have one thing in common, that is, cultivation." Hearing this, Zi Yuan became interested and asked, "Oh. What do you mean by that?" Li Yundong was not in a hurry to explain. He simply sat cross-legged on the floor of the living room. He noticed that there was a futon where Zi Yuan was sitting. He smiled and said, "Did you bring this yourself?" Zi Yuan nodded and asked, "Do you know why people who meditate need a cushion under their feet?" Li Yundong paused. "I don't know." Zi Yuan smiled and said, "Take your time to think about it. Now you can continue with the topic just now. Watch net. Hongom. Li Yundong shifted his attention from the futon to explaining cultivation and cultivation. He said, "The cultivation of cultivation is the same as that of cultivation. They are both methods. Cultivation is about the process of understanding, while cultivation is about getting rid of the false and retaining the true through a certain cultivation method." As he spoke, he glanced at Zi Yuan. She nodded and said, "You're right. Go on." Li Yundong was encouraged and said, "In my opinion, there is no need to make such a clear distinction between cultivation and cultivation." Zi Yuan said disapprovingly, "For thousands of years, Buddhism and Taoism have been incompatible like fire and water. The two cannot exist side by side. How can they be confused?" Li Yundong shook his head. He gave an example and said, "If I go to Beijing, I can choose to walk or take a plane. What's the difference? They all go to the same place. The only difference is that taking a plane is much faster than walking." Zi Yuan retorted, "Isn't speed the biggest difference?" Li Yundong waved his hand and said with a smile, "No, no, speed has its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages. Buddhists pay more attention to the process of cultivation, just like walking to Beijing. Although it is slow, it is precisely because he walked step by step that he saw the scenery and people along the way. It can be said that he has seen all kinds of people in the world. It doesn't matter whether he can reach the end or not, because he has already completed his cultivation." Watch net. 7 km. As for those who go by plane, although the speed is fast, they are only looking at the flowers on horseback. They can only appreciate the pleasure of looking down from a high place, but they have no time to see the true face of the world. Even if they reach the end, how can they get rid of the false and retain the true in this complicated world? Zi Yuan's expression changed. Originally, she had just wanted to warn Li Yundong so that he wouldn't go crazy between Buddhism and Taoism. That was why she had asked, but she hadn't expected that Li Yundong would actually say his own unique opinion. How long had he been reading books and how long had he been in contact with cultivation? How could he say such a thing? Could it be that he was really a cultivation genius that had not been seen for 100 years? For thousands of years, there had been countless disciples of the Zhengyi school, and there were countless geniuses among them. Zi Yuan had seen too many, but it was the first time in her life that someone like Li Yundong, who had been in contact with cultivation for such a short period of time, had made such rapid progress. She looked at Li Yundong in surprise and said, "Go on." Li Yundong smiled again and said, "Of course, you can also say it the other way around. There are yin and yang sides to everything. Take walking to Beijing for example. Although walking can allow people to see all kinds of things in the world, because cultivation is too hard, it is even possible that people will spend their whole lives on this road. Moreover, there may be all kinds of dangers. 9 out of 10, they will not reach the end and give up halfway. Although taking a plane is just a glance at the flowers on horseback and you can't see all kinds of things in the world, this kind of cultivation can stand high and see far. You can see the scenery that you can't see standing on the ground, and you can experience feelings that ordinary people can't. Zi Yuan said, "What do you mean by saying so much?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "In short, whether it's a black cat or a white cat, as long as it can catch mice, it's a good cat. Whether it's Buddhism or Taoism, if it can cultivate the Great Way, it's a big shot." Zi Yuan laughed and said, "Then you still haven't made clear the difference between Buddhism and Taoism?" Li Yundong asked curiously, "Why should I make it clear? Didn't I say it? As long as I can reach my destination, whether it's walking or taking a plane, as long as I can achieve the purpose of cultivation, it's good. Because walking is good, and taking a plane is good. There is no perfect thing in this world. In my opinion, if I want to experience all kinds of things in the world, I will walk, just like when I went to Tibet. If I want to move forward quickly, I will take a plane. In short, choose different methods according to your different needs. Why do you have to distinguish between Buddhism and Taoism?" Li Yundong said with a smile. Zi Yuan's face was full of shock, and her mind was suddenly a little confused. She subconsciously wanted to deny Li Yundong's point of view, but she didn't know how to say it. Ever since she had been conscious, her master and grandmaster had been telling her that Buddhism and Taoism were different, and they couldn't be combined into one. This concept was equivalent to someone telling her that heaven and earth were different, and they couldn't be combined into one. However, why couldn't they be combined into one? Zi Yuan had never thought about it. Just as she had once said to Li Yundong, "The road is under your feet, but sometimes people ignore it and don't pay attention to it. Why is it called buying things instead of buying north and south? Why is it called sleeping peacefully instead of sleeping peacefully? Why do people have to sit cross-legged when cultivating?" This was something that many people saw, but they took it for granted. They had never thought about why, and Zi Yuan was the same. She had always known that Buddhism and Taoism couldn't be practiced together, but she didn't know why it couldn't be practiced together. It was just like how Li Yundong had never thought about why people needed a cushion under their buttocks when they sat cross-legged. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes. She had never been shocked by Li Yundong's diligent cultivation before, because in her opinion, it was just the help of Renyuan Jindan. In addition, this boy did have perseverance and perseverance. This kind of person was everywhere in the cultivation world. There were as many carps in the river, and there was nothing remarkable about it. But now, Zi Yuan had to look at this boy with new eyes. I've read a lot of scriptures since I was a child. I don't know how many classics of Buddhism and Taoism I've read. I didn't expect that today, I would be shocked by a boy who has cultivated for less than half a year. Zi Yuan was shocked and sighed in her heart. It's true that learning doesn't care about age, and those who reach first come first. This person's comprehension ability is really outstanding. Li Yundong didn't know the shock in Zi Yuan's heart. He asked with a smile, "Why did you suddenly ask me this question today?" Zi Yuan came to her senses. She calmed herself down and said, "I was worried that you would read the cultivation classics of Buddhism and Taoism at the same time. I was afraid that you would be lost in the different cultivation theories of the two schools and be unable to extricate yourself. That's why I asked you. Now that I see that you understand the truth so well, I think it's time to teach you Shentong." When Li Yundong heard this, he was surprised and delighted. He couldn't help but be excited and said, "I can learn Shentong." Zi Yuan nodded and said, "When you first completed the Zhuji phase, you could actually learn Shentong, but at that time, your theoretical foundation of cultivation was too poor. You didn't understand a lot of things, and you didn't understand a lot of principles. But I saw that you have been reading the classics without eating or sleeping for the past few days, and you already have a certain theoretical foundation. You know how to start thinking about various cultivation problems. Then, I can start teaching you the realm of the fifth level of cultivation." When Li Yundong thought that he could use a powerful magic like the Fan of Seven Treasures with Shentong, he couldn't help but be so excited that he wanted to scratch his heart and lungs. He couldn't help but ask, "Can I learn it now?" Seeing that he was so anxious, Zi Yuan couldn't help but pull a long face and shout, "Look at how anxious you are. Not to mention learning Shentong, you even have basic luck problems now." Li Yundong's expression became serious. He took a deep breath and sent the qi into his dantian. His whole body suddenly calmed down and he said solemnly, "I've learned something." Zi Yuan nodded and continued, "Well, today I'll teach you the fifth level of cultivation, Shentong. Sorry, I went out for dinner. The update is late. /om/. Chapter 206. Go to the Internet. Zi Yuan was a cultivator who liked to ask why. She had to ask why everything happened. She had to figure things out before she gave up. Go to the Internet. 7 KOM. It was the same when she taught Li Yundong cultivation. From the very beginning, she taught Li Yundong to take the initiative to think, what is cultivation? Until now, she had begun to teach Li Yundong the most important Shentong in cultivation. She still started with a rhetorical question. What is Shentong? Zi Yuan sat cross-legged. Her appearance and bearing were like a pine tree. She was like a master of a sect, which was not to be underestimated. Li Yundong had read the Surangama Sutra and the records of Zong Jinglu before, so he said without hesitation, Shentong is different in Buddhism and Taoism. Zi Yuan asked, "What's the difference?" Li Yundong explained, Buddhism believes that Shentong is the ability to understand things. Shentong is divided into three categories: heavenly eyes, heavenly ears, otherworldly mind, Shentong, predestination, and omniscience. Taoism's Shentong is not divided into so many realms. Taoism believes that there are 5 kinds of Shentong in heaven and earth, which are Tao Tong, Shentong, Yi Tong, and Yao Tong. The Shentong among them is the way for cultivators to reach the God realm through the cultivation of the mind. Zi Yuan smiled and asked, "What's the difference between the other 4 Shentong and the Shentong?" Li Yundong continued, "Tao Tong refers to those who have cultivated to the extreme in theory and knowledge and thus become saints. For example, Laozi, Confucius, Mencius in the pre-Qin period, and Wang Yangming in the Ming dynasty. Yi Tong refers to some medicinal baits in heaven and earth that have gathered the lingqi of heaven and earth and become spiritual creatures, such as the spirit of ginseng and so on. Yi Tong refers to the lingering spirits of the dead who have not been reincarnated and finally become demons and ghosts. Go to the internet. Yao Tong refers to the fox turning into a spirit, and the wood and stone turning into demons. This refers to Yao Tong." Speaking of this, Li Yundong couldn't help but mutter in his heart, "So the little girl is a demon?" She nodded and said, "That's right. There are 5 ways to obtain extremely powerful strength in this world. First, you have to learn. When your knowledge reaches the level of Confucius and Laozi, you will be able to mobilize the noble spirit between heaven and earth. Even if you don't know magic, you will be invulnerable to all evil. Even if demons and ghosts see you, they will have to take a detour and not dare to offend you. Therefore, in this world, there is a saying that all things are inferior, and only those who study well are superior." Zi Yuan's words made Li Yunyang's heart skip a beat. He was more and more sure that he wanted to read a lot of books. Zi Yuan said, "As the saying goes, there is beauty in books, and there is a house of gold in books. Actually, there's another saying, there's a path to heaven in books." Li Yundong couldn't help but reply, "I'm very touched by this sentence. In the past, when I read these books, I only felt that they were like heavenly books. Reading one more word would make me feel dizzy. But now, I feel that every word is a gem. I can understand a lot from every famous sentence." Zi Yuan nodded with a smile and said, "Well, I'll ask you one last time. How many levels are there in heaven? How many levels of cultivation are there?" Li Yundong remembered what Su Chan had told him. He said, "There are 9 levels of heaven, so there are 9 levels of cultivation, right?" Zi Yuan nodded and asked, "Well, my question is, why is Shentong at the 5th level of the 9 levels of heaven?" Li Yundong had been reading these days, forgetting to eat and sleep. Ordinary questions couldn't be asked at all, but this question stunned Li Yundong. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Is there a reason for this order?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "There is a difference between the young and the old." "Why is there no reason?" "You have to remember that the 9 levels of cultivation are not randomly arranged." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Well, then why?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "In fact, it's very simple. Do you know why the emperor is called the emperor?" Li Yundong's eyes lit up and he said, "Ah, I understand. The ancients believed that there were 9 levels in heaven and earth. 9 was the biggest and had the most noble meaning, and 5 was in the middle position and had the meaning of harmony. Look at the net. When these 2 numbers are combined, they are both noble and harmonious. They are extremely auspicious and are the most appropriate symbol for the emperor." Zi Yuan nodded and said, "That's right. Shentong is ranked at the 5th level, which means that the cultivation of this level is the most important level of the 9 levels of heaven. It teaches you how to be the emperor of heaven and earth, and how to be your own emperor." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Isn't the Zhuji phase of the 4th level the most important?" Zi Yuan said, "Zhuji phase is just a watershed. If you can pass the Zhuji phase, it means that you have the strength to compete for the world, but you can't be the emperor yet. But when you complete the 5th level of heaven, you can already become the king of the world. Not only can you be your own emperor, but you can also be the emperor of heaven and earth. Because at that time, you have the power to move mountains and fill seas. What the emperor can do, you can also do. Li Yundong's eyes couldn't help but light up when he heard this. Who didn't want to be the ruler of heaven and earth and have the power to move mountains and fill seas? Especially after Ao Wushuang showed him the power of her Taoist magic, Li Yundong became even more eager to cultivate. He wanted to become stronger, stronger than anyone else, even stronger than God. However, Li Yundong was not blinded by his desire. He asked cautiously, will the heavenly tribulation come after I practice Shentong? Zi Yuan nodded at him and said, yes, Shentong can make you extremely powerful, so from now on, God will be watching you every minute and every second. If you don't practice Shentong, although the heavenly tribulation will come sooner or later, if you are good at hiding and biding your time, you can at least live for more than 20 years. But once you practice Shentong, there will be no room for maneuver. You have to face the most terrible power in the world, the heavenly thunder. Zi Yuan said with a serious face, you have to think about it carefully. Li Yundong laughed and said, what's the point of living a mediocre life? Even if you live longer than a turtle, what's the point? There's no need to think about it. I must practice Shentong, and I will definitely pass the heavenly tribulation. Zi Yuan saw that Li Yundong was full of confidence, but she didn't know where his confidence came from. She said, well, then I'll teach you Shentong. Now, close your eyes, sink your qi into your dantian, gather the 3 flowers above your head, and gather the 5 qis above your head. Then, mobilize the Niden in your body and gather the Jinqi in your body to the top of your head. When this Jinqi is refined, you have to deliberately control this refined qi to go to your Niden. Li Yundong listened carefully and nodded to show that he understood. He asked, then what? Zi Yuan smiled and said, then. That's it. You should strengthen your Niden first. Li Yundong almost fainted. What? You've said so much, beating around the bush, how can it be so simple? Are you kidding me? Zi Yuan smiled and said, Goth's conjecture is just asking you what 1 + 1 equals. It looks very simple, but no one in the world has been able to solve it yet. You should do this first. Li Yundong's eyes were wide open, and he refused to believe Zi Yuan's words. Seeing him like this, Zi Yuan had no choice but to explain, why can't you understand? The various auras in your body are equivalent to various metals such as gold, silver, copper, iron, and so on. What you have to do is to gather these metals in your 3 dantians. With the help of the furnace in your body, you can refine these metals into various currencies that can be used for trading. In other words, you have to turn these things into money. The Jinqi in your body is money. If you encounter something, you have to take out money to buy or settle something. Zi Yuan made a very vulgar but easy to understand analogy. There are many countries in the world, and there are many kinds of goods, but the function of money is the same. It can be circulated and exchanged, and so is Jinqi. The divine ability technique is to strengthen your true essence and make you rich. Then, you can buy whatever you want and learn whatever spells you want. You can learn whatever spells you want. You can learn whatever spells you want to learn. This metaphor made Li Yundong understand all of a sudden. He suddenly said, I see, I understand. You can say that this is learning a passive halo. As for magic, this is an active skill. The passive halo has a bonus effect on the active skill. Seeing that Li Yundong's analogy was even more vulgar than hers, Zi Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She thought to herself, if the senior cultivators heard you make such an analogy of cultivation, they would be so angry that they would smoke from their 7 orifices. After Li Yundong understood, he didn't say anything more. He closed his eyes and quickly entered a meditative state. Although Li Yundong had only been cultivating for a short time, he had the help of the Renyuan Jindan and the enlightenment of Su Chan. Later, he had gone through a difficult journey to cultivate, and his body and the yuanyang qi in his body had become extremely strong and solid. In fact, his cultivation kung fu was no less than that of many cultivators who had been cultivating for more than a decade or even decades. In just a short while, a white line as thick as a pinky finger rose from the top of Li Yundong's head. He could clearly feel that the essence, blood, and qi in his body were continuously gathering in the dantian above his head. The qi of the 5 viscera in his body was also running to the top of his head with the essence, blood, and qi. For a moment, the 3 flowers gathered above his head, and the 5 qis gathered in his head. After the essence, blood, and qi of the 5 viscera were refined into qi on the top of his head, Li Yundong quickly mobilized this qi to rush to the Niden in his lower dantian. In this way, an endless inner cycle was formed. The Niden constantly released qi to stimulate the human body to produce essence, blood, and qi, while essence, blood, and qi constantly stimulated the 5 viscera to secrete viscera qi. The two converged on the top of the head and passed through the human body, which was the furnace, to refine the 3 elements and the 5 qi into jinqi. Then, this jinqi was sent back to the Niden by Li Yundong, thus strengthening the Niden, stimulating it to produce more jinqi, and stimulating more essence, blood, and qi of the 5 viscera to be secreted and produced. The ancient said that man and nature were one. The world between heaven and earth was a big universe, and the human body was a small universe. There were many similarities between the two. The biggest similarity was that there was an endless self-circulating force between heaven and earth, and there was also such a force in the human body. This force was the power of Shentong. After about 2 or 3 hours, Li Yundong slowly opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he found that Zi Yuan was also meditating motionlessly. As soon as Li Yundong's gaze fell on her jade-like cheeks, she woke up slowly. Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong and said, "You're awake. How do you feel?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "I feel good, but I don't feel like I have any Shentong power. I feel like I'm the same as before. There's no difference." Zi Yuan smiled. She looked at the fan of the 7 treasures, which was not far away from Li Yundong, and said, "You can try to transfer your jinqi to the fan of the 7 treasures and see what will happen." Li Yundong's heart suddenly skipped a beat. His eyes fell on the fan of the 7 treasures, and his heart couldn't help pounding. This fan of the 7 treasures is already so powerful when it doesn't have mana. What will happen when it has mana? /om/ Chapter 207. Go to watch net. He took a deep breath, held his breath, and slowly gathered his jinqi toward the fan of 7 treasures. Watch net. 7 KOM. At first, there was nothing strange about the fan of 7 treasures. The jinqi that Li Yundong had gathered was like a stone ox sinking into the sea, with no reaction at all. Li Yundong looked up at Zi Yuan in surprise. She seemed to understand what was on his mind and asked, "You want to buy something worth 1 million with 100,000? Is that even possible?" Li Yundong understood in his heart, so she's saying that my jinqi isn't enough. She can just say it directly. Why does this girl always like to beat around the bush? Zi Yuan seemed to be able to read his mind. She said, "If I didn't do this, you wouldn't have developed the habit of thinking hard. On the path of cultivation, the scarier thing than qi deviation is not being diligent in thinking." Li Yundong smiled and didn't say anything. He continued to concentrate on transferring the jinqi in his body. When Li Yundong continued to transmit it for about 5 minutes, he found that the fan of 7 treasures suddenly jumped faintly, but the movement was extremely slight. Li Yundong even wondered if his eyes were playing tricks on him and he had seen it wrong. But after a while, the fan of 7 treasures suddenly moved again. Only then did Li Yundong believe that the fan of 7 treasures was moving on its own. No one would believe that a heavy and cold iron fan could move on its own. If Li Yundong hadn't experienced so many things himself, he would probably have scoffed at it. However, the truth was right in front of them, and they had no choice but to believe it. In the beginning, the fan of 7 treasures was like a fish that had just died, jumping up and down from time to time. But after a while, it began to tremble incessantly, making the clanging sound of the fan blades touching each other. If Li Yunyang hadn't seen that everything else around him was calm, he would have thought that there had been a small earthquake here, causing the fan of 7 treasures to tremble. Watch net. Li Yundong's eyes widened. He didn't understand why the magical item would have such a reaction and change when he injected Jinqi into the fan of 7 treasures. But when he thought about it and used the various knowledge he had learned to ponder over this problem, he came to a realization. In Li Yundong's opinion, the biggest difference between the Yuanyang Qi and the Jinqi in the body in the past was that the Yuanyang Qi was the Qi inside the human body. When it was in the human body, it could be controlled by the human will. But once it was released outside the body, it could no longer be controlled. It was like a bullet that had been shot out of the barrel. It was impossible to change it halfway. However, true essence Qi was different. True essence Qi was the most essential thing refined from primordial Yang Qi. It was emitted from the Niden and condensed without dissipating. Even if it was released from the human body, it could still be controlled by the cultivator. It was like a tentacle extending out of the human body. It could touch things, and if the tentacle was strong enough, it could even grab some objects. This was the simplest divine ability, telekinesis. When this power was large to a certain extent, this purest power could grab all kinds of things in the world at will for its own use. Just like Su Chan's master, Ao Wushuang, she could summon the 5 elements of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth to attack the opponent. As Li Yundong continued to inject Jinqi into the fan of 7 treasures, he could feel that there was a force in the fan that was constantly resisting his Jinqi. But as he continued to inject it, this resistance was weakening little by little. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help thinking, could it be that this is the spiritual power left by the previous owner of the magical item? If I dispel this spiritual power now and inject my own spiritual power into it, will this fan of 7 treasures have my spiritual power and listen to my command? Thinking of this, Li Yundong felt that he had suddenly become enlightened in the way of divine ability. He no longer held back and subconsciously increased the strength of the Jinqi in his body, continuously sending it into the fan of 7 treasures. Watch net. Achanjoem, the fan of 7 treasures, was originally a special magical item of the patriarch of the Fox Zen school, the Rock Fox. It could not be used by those with extremely powerful magical powers. But after thousands of years, since the mystical silver fox, the Fox Zen school had been full of yin and yang. No male fox could use such a magical item. Over the long years, the strong spiritual power condensed by the rock fox on such a magical item slowly dissipated. Li Yundong continued to inject Jinqi, which was the process of expelling the spiritual power condensed by the rock fox on such a magical item. If it had been more than 1,000 years ago, when the rock fox had condensed the spiritual power on the fan of 7 treasures at its peak, with Li Yundong's current magical power, even if he didn't eat or drink for a year or 2, he might not be able to get rid of the Jinqi mark on the fan. He might even be devoured by the power in the magical item. But after more than 1,000 years, even the majestic buildings had been weathered like sand and stones, let alone this kind of magical item. After Li Yundong continued to inject spiritual power for more than an hour, the fan of 7 treasures finally stopped resisting, and the treasure fan slowly calmed down again. Li Yundong let out a long breath and exhaled a mouthful of white air. He felt as if he had used up all the Jinqi in his body just now, and he felt empty all over. Just as Li Yundong was about to stop and take a rest, he heard Zi Yuan say, "Don't rest. Controlling a magical item is like controlling a beast. If you can't conquer it when it's at its weakest and most empty, when it comes back to its senses, it will be twice the effort and half the result if you want to conquer it again. Li Yundong had no choice but to cheer up. He took a deep breath and once again urged the Jinqi in his body to inject into the fan of 7 treasures. This input was incredible. Li Yundong suddenly stared at the fan of 7 treasures in front of him, shocked beyond belief. Wherever Li Yundong's Jinqi went, the fan of 7 treasures would emit a faint golden light. When the Jinqi flowed to the leaves of the fan, the golden Sanskrit characters on the leaves also shone brightly. After a while, the fan of 7 treasures suddenly jumped up. With a swoosh, all the leaves of the fan opened, like a peacock spreading its tail. In an instant, the room was filled with golden light. After the fan of 7 treasures opened in an instant, the ribs on both sides of the fan did not move. The blades in the middle seemed to have become active, rotating at a high speed like the gears of a fan. They were so fast that they almost formed afterimages, making a dense clanging sound. In this afterimage, the golden Sanskrit characters on the fan of 7 treasures burned like flames in the golden light, jumping and ready to come out. Li Yundong only felt that these burning golden Sanskrit characters were condensing a powerful force, majestic and powerful, like Buddha preaching sutras and Vajra glaring at him. The fan of 7 treasures seemed to have a life of its own. It slowly turned around in the room, and when it faced Zi Yuan, it couldn't help but shine with golden light. The burning golden Sanskrit characters on the leaves of the fan became extremely vigorous, as if in the next second, these characters would turn into golden flames and pounce on Zi Yuan, burning her to ashes. Li Yundong was tongue-tied and said, "What's going on?" In the face of the strong hostility of the fan of 7 treasures, Zi Yuan's expression did not change, as if she could not feel this power. She said lightly, "This is the process of the magical item recognizing its master. Just like when a small animal first opens its eyes, it will subconsciously regard the first thing it sees as its mother. However, the magical item has intelligence. It will immediately find a master with the same aura as itself and reject other auras around it." Li Yundong said curiously, "It's really amazing." He saw that the leaves of the fan of 7 treasures were spinning fast like a chainsaw, and the golden Sanskrit characters around the leaves were like flames. He wanted to reach out and touch it, but he didn't dare. Li Yundong couldn't help asking, "Then how do I use it?" Zi Yuan said, "When the magical item just recognizes its master, it will automatically protect you. You don't need to deliberately use it. But when your spiritual power is far greater than its own, you can try to refine and transform it to give it more powerful power." Li Yundong asked excitedly, "What should I do?" Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, "That's a matter for the future. You can think about it yourself. Now, you can say hello to your first magic tool. From now on, it will be your exclusive possession. You must always keep it by your side. You must never let it leave your hand for even half an inch. However, you must remember that when you encounter a cultivator with stronger spiritual power than you, don't force yourself to fight, lest he snatches your magical item and forcibly erases your mark. In that case, your magical item will become someone else's." Li Yunyang secretly remembered it in his heart. He nodded and then boldly reached out to touch the extremely dazzling fan of 7 treasures. As soon as Li Yundong's fingers touched the fan of 7 treasures, it suddenly trembled violently. Then, with a swoosh, it quickly closed. The golden light and the jumping characters in the room disappeared in an instant. The fan of 7 treasures, which weighed more than 50 kilograms, turned into a black and thick iron lump, floating on Li Yundong's chest, motionless. Li Yundong was secretly surprised. He reached out and touched the end of the fan's bone. Suddenly, the end of the fan emitted a faint golden light. He became more and more curious. He touched it from bottom to top. Wherever his fingertips passed, there was a wave of golden ripples, which was very beautiful. Looking at him, Zi Yuan suddenly remembered the scene when her master had handed her her first magical item. She couldn't help but fall into endless thoughts, and her eyes became very soft. Zi Yuan couldn't help but smile and say, "From today on, you are an official cultivator." Li Yundong, welcome to the world of cultivators/om/. Chapter 208. Go to watch net. Early the next morning, Tiannan City was once again jammed with traffic. By the time Li Yundong arrived at Tiannan University with the fan of 7 treasures on his back, it was already 9:30 a.m. Watch net. 7 k.o.m. Li Yundong couldn't help but mutter to himself as he got out of the car, "I wonder when I'll be able to fly to school. I won't have to suffer from traffic jams anymore." Li Yundong walked into the school with the fan of 7 treasures on his back. As soon as he entered the school, he ran into Feng Na. "Li Yundong." Feng Na's voice was clear and crisp. As soon as she shouted, those who knew Li Yundong turned their heads and looked at her with different expressions. Li Yundong had learned to live under such attention. He smiled at Feng Na and said, "What's the matter, future president of the student council? What can I do for you?" Feng Na waved her hand and smilingly said, "Don't make fun of me. We haven't even started yet. By the way, I'm attending a campaign speech tomorrow. Are you coming?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay, I'll definitely come." "When exactly?" Feng Na smiled and said, 7:30 p.m., the school's small auditorium. As soon as he heard about the auditorium, Li Yundong couldn't help but think of the storm caused by the "days of living with a stewardess" incident. He subconsciously didn't want to go there. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Why did you choose this place?" Feng Na had also thought of this matter. She giggled and said, "What does it have to do with me? Do you think I want to?" As they walked side by side into the school, Li Yundong said, "Where's Ching Ching? Isn't she inseparable from you?" Feng Na sighed and said, "Alas, don't mention it. I'm in my senior year, and I'm about to graduate. I'm about to enter the big vat that is society. I'm busy looking for a job." Li Yundong said in surprise, "It's only the beginning of the 4th year. Are you busy looking for a job?" Feng Na smiled. "Clumsy birds have to start flying early. Ching Cheng's family background isn't very good. This summer, she's interning at a company. Once she becomes an intern, she might be able to become a permanent employee. So, she won't be coming to some classes for now. She'll try her best to settle her work first." Li Yundong asked, "What about you? Do you have any intention of working?" Feng Na sighed. "How can it be that easy? How hard was it to find a good job these days? I want to work at a TV station, but I can't get in because I don't have any connections." Hearing this, Li Yundong secretly sighed in his heart. If he hadn't embarked on the path of cultivation, perhaps in another year, he would also have to worry about all kinds of employment problems like Ching Cheng and Feng Na. Watch net. Feng Na turned to look at Li Yundong and asked with a smile, "What about you? What's your plan?" Li Yundong chuckled and said with emotion, "I don't have any plans. I'm just a layman with no ambition." Feng Na pointed a finger at Li Yundong and laughed. "Excessive modesty equals arrogance." Li Yundong smiled and said, "I'm not being modest. I really haven't thought about what I want to do after graduation." As he said this, he sighed and looked at the familiar campus. He sighed and said, "I just feel that the days pass so quickly. In the blink of an eye, I'm almost a senior. More than half of my college life has passed." Feng Na sighed. "Yeah, that's why I have to find a way to add something important to my resume during my senior year. Otherwise, I won't run for the president of the student council." Li Yundong smiled. "Feng Na, you'll be fine. With your qualifications, you'll definitely be the #1 actress in our Tiannan TV station in the future. Feng Na smiled sweetly. Thank you for your auspicious words. While the two of them were talking, Feng Na had already reached the bottom of the teaching building. Seeing that Li Yundong had no intention of going to class, she couldn't help but ask, "You don't have any classes this morning?" Li Yundong smiled and patted the bag hanging on top of the fan of 7 treasures. "I'm going to the library to return some books." Feng Na's eyes fell on the fan of 7 treasures, which was tightly wrapped in black cloth on Li Yundong's back. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "What on earth are you carrying? Last time I saw you carrying such a big and long thing, I wanted to ask you about it." Li Yundong smiled and dodged the question. "It's nothing. It's just something very important." Feng Na saw that Li Yundong was being vague, but she didn't pursue the matter. Instead, she just let out an "oh." The curiosity in her eyes grew. She watched as Li Yundong walked a few meters away. Suddenly, she shouted, "Li Yundong!" Li Yundong stopped in his tracks and turned around to look at her. Feng Na stared at Li Yundong. "You're going to be an amazing person in the future," she said in a serious tone. Li Yundong smiled. "Why do you say that all of a sudden?" Feng Na put her hands behind her back and shook her head. "There's no reason. I just feel that a boy like you will definitely achieve great things in the future. Maybe you will become the boss of a big company." Li Yundong laughed. "I'm already a man with negative assets. How can I be the boss of a big company? But, thanks for your kind words. Is this considered reciprocity?" Feng Na chuckled. "No, I really think so. Who knows, maybe Cheng Cheng and I will go to you in the future. You have to give us a bowl of rice to eat." Li Yundong didn't care. He smiled. "Fine. You sent yourself to my door and let me, a capitalist with negative assets, exploit you. I have no reason to be merciful." Feng Na giggled and waved at Li Yundong. "Then I'm going to class. See you later. Remember to come back in 2 days." "You have to come." Li Yundong waved back. "I'll be there." After watching Feng Na go upstairs, he turned around and walked toward the library. Go to Kanban. 7K0/ along the way, Li Yundong pondered, what can I do in the future? Or, how can I support myself in the future? I can't live off a woman all day long, can I? What the hell? As the saying goes, one's mouth is soft when one is fed, and one's hands are short when one is fed. How could one cultivate if one relied on relief or lived off a woman all day long? Even if I start cultivating, I won't be able to do it. Plus, I still have to support Su Chan in the future. I can't let her suffer with me, can I? I have to find a way to make money. But how can I make money? Li Yundong thought back to his 2 years in university. It was a complete waste of time. Plus, the Chinese department I'm in is **T. I don't even know what kind of job I should find after I graduate. It seems like any job would be suitable for me, but then again, none of them seem to be suitable for me. What the **CK was going on? Why did I choose the Chinese department back then? It's such a lame major. Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Even a finance major would be good. It would be so much easier to find a job. Li Yundong thought as he walked. From the teaching building to the library, he had to pass through the school field. As soon as he reached the field, he heard a burst of shouting coming from the field. He turned his head and was immediately amused. He saw a group of young students in green uniforms doing military training on the spacious and flat lawn of the field. At this time, it was the season of autumn. The sun above their heads was scorching the students on the sports field, making them sweat profusely. Some of them were standing in military postures on the sports field under the scorching sun, some were lifting their legs, and some were learning military boxing from the instructors. As Li Yundong walked across the field, he looked at the new students with a smile on his face. He couldn't help but think of the days when he first entered the school. These students who were in the middle of military training also saw Li Yundong passing through the playground. Some of them recognized him from the forum and whispered to each other, "Hey, is that Li Yundong? Yeah, he doesn't look like the PP and video in the post. Well, he's a little tanned, but I think he's more handsome. Hey, what's that thing he's carrying? Why does it look so heavy? I don't know. Maybe it's a prop he uses to act cool." Act cool? I think it's pretentious, isn't it? Come on, people who have the ability to act cool are called awesome, and some people who don't have the ability to act cool are called idiots. Humph, I don't believe he's that great. In my opinion, it's all bragging. The new students whispered to each other and pointed at Li Yundong. The instructor next to them shouted, "What are you arguing about?" This loud shout shocked the students and made them tremble all over. They withdrew their gazes one after another, not daring to look at Li Yundong again, let alone say a word. One by one, they stood obediently. Only a tall and burly boy looked at Li Yundong's back thoughtfully, and his eyes gradually emitted a sharp and excited light. Li Yundong went to the school library to return the books and then borrowed a few more. He didn't want to go to class, so he sat in the reading area and flipped through the books while thinking about a question: what can I do in the future? What skills can I use to make a living and make money? Although cultivation could transcend all living beings, without money, there was no way to solve the problem of eating and drinking. The further Li Yundong walked on the path of cultivation, the more he understood that money wasn't everything when it came to cultivation, but money was absolutely necessary. Li Yundong pulled out a piece of paper and a pen from his bag and wrote down all the skills he knew on it. Then, he stared blankly at them one by one. He realized that other than being good at fighting and treating minor illnesses, he really didn't know anything else. What am I supposed to do? What can I do about it? Li Yundong couldn't help but worry. But just as he was worrying, he suddenly heard the crisp sound of a slap coming from the quiet reading room. Li Yundong turned his head and saw a girl crying at a boy. "You bastard! You bastard! How could you break up with me?" As she said this, she waved her fist and punched the boy. Li Yundong took a closer look and suddenly smiled. "Hey, isn't this the boy with the peach blossom eyes who was diagnosed by Su Chan as having a deficiency of yin in his kidney? This handsome boy really did look like a magnet for bees and butterflies." He didn't expect that the girl in front of him would act up on the spot and slap him in front of everyone. He was anxious and angry. He covered his cheek with his hand, and his face turned purple. "Are you crazy?" he yelled. The girl hysterically cursed and hit him. "Yes, I'm crazy. I'm crazy because I like you, you bastard. I'm going to kill you today." Seeing that everyone's eyes were on him, the handsome boy suddenly felt dizzy. Just like last time when he was with Su Chan, he used his excellent tradition. He couldn't breathe, his eyes rolled back, his mouth crooked, and he passed out. Out of the blue, people always ask me, "Tang Tang, how long have you been writing? How many chapters are there in your book?" Questions like that. Every time, I can only smile bitterly. How would I know? That's right. You're the one who wrote this book. How could you not know? By the way, your life is still your own. Do you know how long you can live? Do you know how long you can live? Hee, you don't know either, do you? Unless you kill yourself immediately, you won't be able to answer my questions. Neither will I. Unless I kill myself immediately, I won't be able to answer your questions either. So, please, don't ask this kind of question again in the future. Just keep reading. You guys only asked once, but I've been asked countless times. I can't take it anymore. Please, please, thank you, thank you. /om/. Chapter 209. Go to watch net. Although school had just started, there were still many senior students who chose to study in the cool and quiet reading room of the library. Watch net. 7 KOM. As soon as the handsome man fainted, the students in the reading room all stood up, stretched their necks, and looked curiously at the crime scene. Li Yundong glanced at him and found that the handsome man was lying on the ground, twitching and foaming at the mouth. Li Yundong's heart trembled and he walked over. Out of the way, everyone out of the way. As soon as Li Yundong took a step forward, a voice rang out. He turned his head and suddenly found that the person who spoke was also an acquaintance. It was Yan Hua, who had followed Ruan Hongling to enter the examination as the top scorer. Yan Hua drove away the onlookers and said, "Everyone, don't crowd around here. It will make it difficult for him to breathe." As he spoke, he turned around and was about to look at the fainted handsome man, but he saw Li Yundong walking toward him. Yan Hua was stunned and frowned inwardly. Why is he here? Li Yundong wanted to check on the beautiful man's condition, but it was very inconvenient for him to carry the fan of 7 treasures on his back. He couldn't even bend down, so he had to untie the fan of 7 treasures and put it aside. Then, he squatted down to check on the beautiful man's condition. When the girl next to him saw Li Yundong reaching out to the handsome man, she immediately asked anxiously, "What are you doing?" Li Yundong glanced at her indifferently. Although he didn't say a word, the girl felt a kind of dignified aura coming from him. She was speechless and didn't dare to stop him again. Li Yundong felt the pulse of the beautiful man and frowned secretly. Yan Hua, who was beside him, sneered and said, "You also know medicine." Yan Hua had been holding back his anger and wanted to compete with Li Yundong. Seeing that Li Yundong's movements didn't seem to be pretending, he couldn't help but ask, "What is the diagnosis of this person's illness?" "What kind of diagnosis?" When Li Yundong heard this, he immediately raised his head and looked at Yan Hua in surprise. "You know traditional Chinese medicine?" TCM was different from Western medicine, which was a precise microscopic science. TCM was a medical science that regulated and adjusted from a macroscopic perspective. To observe and determine a person's illness, one must start from the 4 aspects of look, listen, question, and feel the pulse. Furthermore, several doctors would often diagnose different illnesses, which required medical theory to differentiate. Li Yundong had read a lot of medical books these days, so he naturally understood this. As soon as he heard Yan Hua's words, he knew that this arrogant young man obviously knew Chinese medicine. Watch net. 7 KOM. Yan Hua proudly raised his chin. "I don't dare to say that I understand. I only know a little." "Do you dare to argue with me here?" Li Yundong didn't comment. "Oh," he said. He opened the eyelids of the beautiful man, looked at him, and said casually, "Why didn't you go to military training?" Yan Hua snorted. "I'm a specially recruited student. I don't need to go to military training. Do you really think I'm a weak bookworm?" Li Yundong glanced at him, smiled slightly, and didn't answer. Seeing Li Yundong like this, Yan Hua became angry. He felt that Li Yundong was looking down on him, but he was also a person who thought highly of himself. He thought to himself, "What's so great about you? Why do you look down on me?" "I look down on you." Yan Hua couldn't help but say angrily, "Hey, do you dare to argue with me here?" Li Yundong smiled. He helped the beautiful man up and said to the girl who was wiping her tears, "You hold him." The girl was panicking and at a loss. Subconsciously, she listened to Li Yundong's words and supported the handsome man with her hand. Seeing that Li Yundong didn't answer him, Yan Hua thought that Li Yundong was guilty. He sneered and said, "I don't think you dare. This man's illness is obviously kidney deficiency. I'll prick him with a needle, and he'll wake up immediately." A curious student couldn't help but ask, "You also know acupuncture?" Yan Hua said proudly, "Of course." He touched his body casually, and suddenly a trace of embarrassment flashed across his face. "But I didn't bring a needle today. Do any of you have a hair clip or something? Can I borrow it?" Immediately, a girl took a hair clip from her head and handed it over. Yan Hua took it and thanked her. "Thank you very much." As he said this, he turned around and was about to show his skills, but he saw Li Yundong's palm pressing on the beautiful man's head, as if he was massaging him. Yan Hua suddenly said angrily, "What are you doing? Get out of the way, don't waste time. You don't even know how to argue. How can you treat people?" As soon as his voice fell, he saw Li Yundong suddenly grab the beautiful man's head with his 5 fingers, as if he had lifted something. In the blink of an eye, the beautiful man snorted and woke up. The surrounding students suddenly burst into an uproar. "He's awake, he's awake." The girl next to him couldn't help crying. She threw herself into the beautiful man's arms, crying and shouting, "I'm sorry, it's my fault. You scared me to death just now." When the beautiful man woke up, he saw the girl in his arms crying, and his heart softened. He said, "It's my fault. I shouldn't have broken up with you. Watch net." Seeing that the two of them had made up, Li Yundong said with a smile, "It's all right now. The rain has passed. But I'll have to trouble you to change the place when it rains and thunders. This is not a good place for a sitcom." His words made the students around him laugh. Yan Hua stared at Li Yundong with his mouth agape. He couldn't understand how Li Yundong could make the boy recover just by touching his head with his hand. Could it be that this boy just happened to wake up? Yan Hua thought to himself. When he saw the students around him laughing, his heart suddenly tightened and he thought to himself, "What are these people laughing at? Could it be that he was laughing at me for trying to argue with Li Yundong and calling me a nerd?" Just now, he had chased after Li Yundong to argue with him, but Li Yundong had not answered his words at all. He had cured this person with a wave of his hand. In contrast, he had simply become a bookworm who only knew how to show off his tongue. The more Yan Hua thought about it, the more he felt that these people were laughing at him. He looked at Li Yundong with jealousy, hatred, annoyance, and anger. He felt that the exclamations and praises of these people around him should be directed at him, but Li Yundong had forcibly stolen his limelight. Yan Hua had been an excellent student since he was a child. Wherever he went, he was pursued and worshipped by his classmates. He thought that the students of this third-rate university would admire him very much because he was the top scholar, but the truth was the opposite. This damned Li Yundong seemed to have been sent by God to deliberately mess with him, making him appear shallow and childish all the time, just like a nerd. Yan Hua looked at the handsome man coldly and couldn't help but say sarcastically, "I advise you to work less when it comes to sex in the future. With your body, if you continue to work like this, I'm afraid it won't be long before you die young." This sentence made the surrounding students burst into laughter. The handsome man's face also turned red, and he was so embarrassed that he couldn't speak. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. The girls around him also blushed, as if they were about to bleed. Secretly, they pinched the flesh of the handsome man's waist with their fingers. Li Yundong patted the handsome man on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I won't die young." Of course, the handsome man recognized Li Yundong, who was an influential figure. He asked tentatively, "Really?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "Of course." The handsome man's face suddenly brightened up, as if he had taken a tranquilizer. He said to the girl next to him with great joy, "You see, I'm so young. It's impossible for me to die young because of this kind of thing. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, however, your kidney yin deficiency is too serious. Your kidney essence is not strong, and your yuanyang is insufficient. Although you won't die young, premature ejaculation is certain. Premature ejaculation. This sentence was even more powerful and shocking than the explosion of a nuclear hydrogen bomb. The students around suddenly stomped their feet and laughed wildly. The handsome man's face suddenly turned as red as a pig's liver, but the girl didn't blush at all. She glared at the boy arrogantly, as if to prove that Li Yundong's words were true. Li Yundong smiled. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, the handsome man grabbed him and whispered, "Boss, you are too cruel. How can you say that I have premature ejaculation in front of so many people? Do you want me to be a man?" Li Yundong said with a serious face, "Last semester, my girlfriend said that your kidney yin deficiency is too serious. She told you not to overindulge in sex, but you didn't listen. Now, when you are nervous and excited, you will easily pass out. Do you know why?" The handsome man's face turned purple. He shook his head and said, "I don't know." Li Yundong said, "It's because you have consumed too much essence qi in your body. When you encounter this kind of thing, your qi and blood can't supply, so you will easily pass out. You have to be careful. If you don't pay attention, it will not be a problem of premature ejaculation. It will definitely be a problem of early death." Seeing that Li Yundong was about to leave, the handsome man reached out and grabbed his arm. He begged, "Boss, you can't just watch me die. Is there any good medicine that can help me?" Li Yundong thought for a moment, put down the fan of 7 treasures, sat down, took out a notebook and pen, and wrote a prescription for strengthening yang and nourishing the kidneys. Then, he tore off the paper and handed it to the handsome man, saying, "As the saying goes, food is better than medicine, food is better than spiritual nourishment, and spiritual nourishment is better than physical nourishment. Don't be superstitious about these things." The handsome man took the prescription and glanced at it. He said curiously, "I've heard that food is better than medicine, but food is better than spiritual nourishment, and spiritual nourishment is better than physical nourishment. What does spiritual nourishment mean?" Li Yundong explained, "Food is better than spiritual nourishment. It means that you need to calm down every day, clear your mind, and control your desires. Don't be easily irritable. The 7 emotions and 6 desires are very harmful to the body. When your emotions are good, your mood will be good. Once you are in a good mood, it will be more useful than anything you eat." When Wu Zixu passed through Shaoguan, why did his hair turn white overnight? It was because his emotions were filled with fear and panic that his kidney essence was injured. You see, there are already white hairs in your hair, which means that your kidneys have begun to have problems. Be more careful. As Li Yundong spoke, some of the curious students around him also listened attentively and nodded one after another. They felt that Li Yundong's words were very reasonable. Some people even took out pens and quickly wrote down every word Li Yundong said. At this time, the handsome man didn't want to hide his illness for fear of treatment. He asked again, "What does it mean that spiritual nourishment is better than physical nourishment?" Li Yundong said, "It's useless to just have a good mood and eat good food all day long, because people need to exercise more. As the saying goes, life is about exercise. That's the truth. If you are in a good mood all day long and eat good food, but don't exercise, it will only create a fat pig, and it will not make your body better at all. Therefore, more exercise is the best way to nourish your body." Speaking of this, Li Yundong seemed to think of something and added, "Of course, bed exercise is not exercise, it is a matter of great catharsis. And exercise can't be too vigorous, like in the gym, it's not good to work hard and sweat a lot. That's called going too far is as bad as not going far enough. It's best to go out for a walk or jog for dozens of minutes, half an hour to an hour after eating. As the saying goes, walk 100 steps after a meal and live to 99. Li Yundong's words were simple and easy to understand. Not only did the handsome man suddenly understand, but the students around him also understood and looked at Li Yundong with admiration in their eyes. The handsome man carefully hid the prescription and said with a smile, "Boss, I admire you today. With such good medical skills, why don't you become a doctor?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Nowadays, people don't believe in traditional Chinese medicine." The handsome man said, "Then it's all the more reason to promote it." Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, and a voice in his mind shouted loudly, "That's right, why don't I use my advantage in cultivation to do something related to medical practice? I can make money this way, and I can also promote our Chinese culture. Why not?" Last week's flower list was regrettably only ranked 9th, and the 8th place was taken by Xiao Qian. The number of flowers for children's shoes reached a new high, but they were still regrettably defeated, although they were defeated with honor. This week's Tuesday and Saturday, tomorrow's third watch, children's shoes more flowers. /om/ Chapter 210. Go to watch net. It was as if someone in the fog had suddenly pointed him in the right direction. Although the path was still unclear, at least he knew where to go. At least he wouldn't be like a lost person who didn't know where to go. The beautiful man's words made Li Yundong feel as if he had been enlightened all of a sudden. Go to watch net. Net. Super_speed. More. New. After learning from Li Yundong about how to strengthen one's yang and nourish one's kidneys and how to nourish one's body, beautiful man left happily. Li Yundong, on the other hand, understood the direction of his future from beautiful man's words, and walked out of the library with joy in his heart. When he reached the door, he saw the old man in charge of the library. He smiled and nodded to him, then walked out of the door. Yan Hua, who had been looking at Li Yundong with hatred and jealousy, walked up to the old man and asked in surprise, "Grandpa, do you know him?" Yan Hua's grandfather laughed and said, "This is the person I told you about on the phone. What do you think? Are you convinced?" Yan Hua's face was ugly. He shouted, "Why should I be convinced? What's so great about him?" After that, he walked out angrily. Yan Hua's grandfather looked at Yan Hua and shook his head secretly. He sighed in his heart. This boy has been arrogant since he was a child. He is used to being flattered. I'm afraid this time he is going to suffer a big setback. When Li Yundong returned from the original path with the fan of 7 treasures on his back, most of the freshmen on the sports field had already rested. Many of them were resting under the shade of trees. Only one class was still persistently practicing military boxing under the sun. Li Yundong glanced at the class on the way back and found that it was actually a student practicing with an instructor. The other students were watching the scene on the field excitedly and nervously. It was not common for a student to fight an instructor. Li Yundong couldn't help but stop and take a second look. The instructor on the field wasn't very tall, standing at about 1.7 meters. However, his body was lean, his skin was tanned, and his eyes were bright and full of expression. With one look, one could tell that he was a martial artist. The freshman standing in front of him was wearing a camouflage uniform. He looked quite tall, and his sleeves were rolled up high. The muscles on his arms were like steel bars, and it was obvious that he was a martial artist of external martial arts. Go to watch net. When the boy saw Li Yundong standing not far away and watching, a trace of excitement suddenly flashed in his eyes. He took a deep breath, leaped forward, and punched the instructor like a cannon. As soon as he made his move, Li Yundong secretly frowned. The moment an expert made a move, one would know whether or not he was an expert. Ordinary people would approach their opponents cautiously and observe their opponent's minute flaws while they were still, or they would circle around their opponent and observe their opponent's reaction and footsteps during the movement. From there, they would judge their opponent's agility. If the opponent's footwork was not as nimble as his, then he would walk around the opponent, trying to create an advantageous position where the opponent's back was to his advantage, and then fiercely attack the opponent's back. If the opponent's footwork was more nimble than his, then he would immediately rush forward and engage in hand-to-hand combat, not allowing the opponent to leave his attack range and footwork range. However, the moment the boy punched out, not only did he go straight for the instructor's chest, he didn't even bother to test his strength. Instead, he took a huge leap and his movements were so big that he didn't seem to care about the instructor at all. Moreover, in Li Yundong's opinion, the fact that the boy dared to do such a thing showed that he was indeed capable. His punches were fierce and experienced, and his moves were bold and presumptuous. If Li Yundong hadn't reached the Zhuji phase, it would have been very difficult for him to deal with the boy. The instructor practiced military boxing. Although there were striking techniques in military boxing, most of them focused on capturing and subduing the enemy. When the instructor saw that the student was coming at him aggressively and full of youthful vigor, he calmly took a step back. He grabbed the boy's fist with one hand and grabbed the boy's arm with the other. He leaned his body to the side, not only dodging the boy's fist, but also burrowed his entire body into the boy's chest. His legs dug into the boy's crotch, squeezed, and leaned. This move was very exciting. As long as the instructor spun his feet and followed the force just now, he would be able to turn his body to the back of the student. He would immediately be in an advantageous position and be able to subdue the opponent with the cross-lock grappling technique. But just as his legs were about to squeeze the boy's body, he suddenly felt an extremely powerful force coming from the boy. The student in front of him suddenly let out a loud roar and spat out an air cannon from his mouth, causing the instructor's heart to flutter. His body couldn't help but tremble, and then his whole body flew up with a whoosh. He actually flew 5 or 6 meters away, heading straight for Li Yundong like a cannonball. Go watch net. 7 KOM. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected that he would be able to see a troublesome matter just by looking at it from the sidelines. He reached out and pressed on the back of the instructor. A gentle force was sent out, and the instructor was quietly blocked. The exchange between the student and the instructor was very fast. It could be said that it was as fast as lightning. The surrounding students only saw a blur before the instructor was sent flying. It was like a scene in a kung fu movie where the instructor was suspended on a wire. Wow! The freshmen immediately burst into an uproar. Some of them who knew the student immediately shouted excitedly, "Feng Ji, you're awesome." In the eyes of the freshmen, the instructors were lofty existences that could not be offended. However, Feng Ji, who was also a freshman like them, had actually sent the instructor flying in an extremely exaggerated manner. This immediately caused them to be astonished by Feng Ji. Some of the students in the dormitory who knew Feng Ji more or less began to brag about him with pride. Now you know how awesome Brother Feng is, right? You have to know that Brother Feng is the national martial arts champion. Are you serious? Why did the national martial arts champion come to our school? Why didn't he go to the sports school? Well, how would I know? But I heard that he's a specially enrolled student. After the instructor who had been sent flying stopped in his tracks, he looked back to see who had caught him. After seeing that it was also a student of this school, he was immediately stunned. He muttered to himself, "I felt like I had hit a wall just now. My opponent's hand was soft and strong, and I wasn't hurt at all. Obviously, he's also a master. When did Tiannan University become so crouching tigers and hidden dragons?" As he thought about it, he laughed self-deprecatingly. "Thank you so much. I didn't expect to embarrass myself so much today." Li Yundong smiled and said, he has been practicing martial arts for many years. It's normal for him to lose. The instructor looked at Li Yundong. He saw that the boy in front of him was standing like a pine tree. Although his aura was extremely strong, he didn't give off an aggressive feeling like Feng Ji. Instead, he gave off a strong impression. The instructor asked curiously, "Are you also a martial artist?" Ever since Li Yundong had started practicing Shentong in the Zhuji phase, his powerful aura, which he couldn't restrain, had all been refined into the Jinqi of the Niden and stored in the lower dantian of his lower abdomen. Li Yundong's aggressive heroic spirit had also become restrained from the outside. He was no longer like before, where he would stab people of the same gender wherever he went. Li Yundong smiled at the instructor and said, "I guess so." As he said this, he subconsciously glanced at Feng Ji. Feng Ji, who was surrounded by these freshmen like stars surrounding the moon, also happened to look up at Li Yundong. Like an intruder who had just stepped into someone else's territory, he raised his chin and gave Li Yundong a provocative look. If it had been in the past, with Li Yundong's irritable character, he might have immediately greeted him with a sneer. But now, Li Yundong had succeeded in the Zhuji phase and his Shentong had appeared for the first time. His temperament had also changed, gradually becoming deep and tolerant. The sky accommodates all things, and the sea accommodates all rivers. It was impossible for people to kick or bite a dog to death just because they saw it barking at them on the side of the road. Because people knew that they were a level higher than this kind of vicious dog. Humans were the wisest of all things. It was the same for cultivators. When Li Yundong faced Feng Ji's provocation, he suddenly found that he was not shocked or angry, nor anxious. Instead, he felt a sense of condescension in his heart. At this moment, Li Yundong knew that deep in his heart, he had begun to completely accept the fact that he was a cultivator. He was stronger and more detached than most people in the world. He was a dignified cultivator with divine powers. Why would he bother with a freshman? In the face of Feng Ji's provocation, Li Yundong just smiled slightly. Like a breeze blowing on his face, he turned around and walked away, his figure elegant and calm. The instructor, who was much more mature than the students, looked at Li Yundong's back and secretly praised him. They knew that only a person who had really experienced storms and seen through the world could be so calm from behind. Only a truly powerful person could have such a gentle and tolerant smile. Li Yundong walked away freely, but the freshmen didn't think so. In their opinion, Li Yundong, who was very famous in the school, had obviously retreated in the face of the challenge of a freshman. The freshmen were always in awe of the older students. They came to the university with uneasiness, fresh curiosity, and some ambition. As freshmen who had just been released from the cage of high school, deep in their hearts was a soul that longed to show itself. They longed to perform and to be in the limelight, especially when they found that there was a freshman like them around them who was strong enough to challenge the authority of the most legendary figure in the school. The restlessness and rebellion in their hearts all broke out in an instant. Humph, what legendary figure! I think he's a coward. That's right. He walked away so arrogantly. What's so great about him? Hey, you don't understand. He's smart. What's the benefit of fighting with you here? If you win, people will say that you bully the freshmen. If you lose, it's even worse. You'll lose everything. This is called shrewdness. Do you understand? Humph, I saw the posts on the forum praising him so much that I thought he was very awesome. I didn't expect that he was also a wily old fox. I despise him. Are you qualified to despise him? Who do you think you are? Only our brother Feng is qualified. Humph, flatterer. The students whispered to each other, while Feng Ji stood still and stared at Li Yundong's back. He was like a young lion, his eyes sharp and threatening. He clenched his fists so hard that they made cracking sounds, like beans being fried, which made people's hair stand on end. If you don't throw flowers while reading, be careful that you die young. Ahem, that's right. /om/. You're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.